Chapter 876. He looked back at the banners hung by the 4 sects on the tall building. Since they were willing to give this, why didn't they come to support them? Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he looked at the people in the air. He could see a hint of mockery on their faces. Someone is playing tricks. This was Yu Qianqiu's first reaction. With this speculation, Yu Qianqiu's mind calmed down. He slowly walked into the building with his hands behind his back. In the center of the building's main hall was a pool made of jade. Yu Qianqiu sat at the edge of the pool while humming a little tune. He crossed his legs and looked at the small fish in the pool. From time to time, he would glance at the cultivators who were admiring the various immortal herbs. These people's cultivation levels weren't high. There was only one late-stage soul formation cultivator. They were all admiring the immortal herbs in the crystal cabinets in the hall with amazement. A few cultivators with big red flowers on their chests were eagerly introducing the immortal herbs to the people in the hall. The degree of emptiness at the opening was beyond everyone's expectations. However, there were a lot of people watching from the outside. The cold on the inside and the warm on the outside made everyone feel that something was wrong. Although the cultivators with big red flowers on their chests stood in their respective positions, they couldn't help but glance at Yu Qianqiu. They saw Yu Qianqiu leisurely sitting by the pool and humming a little tune. It was clear that he had a card up his sleeve. Everyone gradually calmed down. Lu Yanqing, who was guarding behind a large crystal cabinet, looked around and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. There was a faint trace of worry in her eyes. Even she could see that it wasn't easy to survive in the immortal realm. The deity transformation initial stage cultivator, who had led them and had already browsed through all the immortal herbs on the 5th floor. Just as Yu Qianqiu had expected, the cultivator had only come in to look and had no intention of buying them. It seemed like he couldn't afford them and was walking out of the building, preparing to leave. When he passed by the pool, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting with his legs crossed, suddenly shouted in an unfriendly tone, "Stop right there." Everyone in the hall stared at him. That person paused and cupped his hands at Yu Qianqiu. "Sect Master Yu, are you talking to me?" Yu Qianqiu stood up indifferently and walked in front of him. He said coldly, "Why did you steal my world commerce's immortal herbs?" When he said this, the lords in the hall quickly checked the crystal cabinets they were guarding. They found that none of the immortal herbs were missing. They looked at each other in confusion. That person's expression stiffened. When he saw everyone looking at him, as if they were looking at a thief, he faintly felt that something was wrong. He immediately cupped his fists and explained, "Sect Master Yu, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. I didn't take anything from your merchant association. If Sect Master Yu doesn't believe me, you can check. I definitely don't have any immortal herbs on me. You still dare to quibble? I said you stole it, so you stole it. Do you think I'm wrong?" Yu Qianqiu shouted coldly and extended a palm from his sleeve. The person in front of him immediately exploded into a cloud of white mist. The white mist was instantly sucked into Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. In the blink of an eye, that person turned into a sinister-looking mummy and was on the verge of collapsing. Yu Qianqiu waved his sleeve expressionlessly, and a green flame swept the mummy up to the top of the pool. When the green flame returned to Yu Qianqiu's sleeve, the giant mummy had already turned into drifting ashes and fell into the pool, attracting the fish in the water to kiss the surface of the water. Everyone in the hall looked at each other. They finally saw the terror of the torture envoy again. However, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu would suddenly kill him. Lu Yanqing bit her lip and stared at Yu Qianqiu. There was a hint of anger in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu coldly looked around and suddenly shouted, "Guard all the entrances and exits. Don't let a single one escape. If anyone dares to escape, kill them without mercy." He indifferently stared at the other cultivators who came in to watch. The various lords immediately guessed that Yu Qianqiu must have a reason for doing this. They quickly scattered and guarded the entrances and exits, staring at those people like tigers watching their prey. Those cultivators panicked and subconsciously gathered together, putting their backs against each other in a defensive position. Someone shouted, "Sect Master Yu, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this?" Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly as he walked towards them and said indifferently, "I just heard from outside that you were ordered by someone to deliberately cause trouble. As a result, Those people outside were so scared that they didn't dare to come in. The various lords looked at each other again. This reason seemed too far-fetched. Based on these 5 people's cultivation, what trouble could they cause? With their cultivation, they couldn't possibly scare the people outside. The person who shouted cupped his fists and said, "Sect Master, someone is deliberately misleading us. How could the few of us come to World Commerce City to cause trouble? There is another reason why the people outside didn't come in. It has nothing to do with us. Please, Sect Master, be magnanimous and let us leave." "So you're saying that someone is wrongly accusing you?" Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said indifferently, "I'm not an unreasonable person, and I won't easily believe a one-sided story. I'll give you a chance to explain yourself. Then tell me, why didn't the people outside come in? Also, I'm warning you, don't try to fool me. Once I find out, I guarantee that none of you will leave alive." With that said, the various lords instantly understood. After going through so much trouble, this was their main goal, which was to find out the reason for this strange matter. They were all filled with admiration. The expressions of the people trapped also changed. They weren't idiots and naturally knew Yu Qianqiu's goal. Originally, some people were still holding on to a trace of hope. They thought that this was hallucinatory immortal city, and Yu Qianqiu wouldn't dare to do anything to them. Otherwise, they would be severely punished by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. However, Yu Qianqiu had just come to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. He had made up a random excuse and killed the innocent person. They were extremely daring and simply disregarded the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. At this moment, everyone understood that the person from before didn't steal anything at all. Yu Qianqiu had killed him for everyone to see. After a moment of silence in the hall, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "My patience is limited. I believe everyone has heard that the 30 disciples of the Heartless Palace all died in my hands in the ruins of God. Ask yourselves, how do you compare to them? I advise you to say it as soon as possible. Once I lose my patience, even if you want to say it, I might not want to hear it." Ruthless in the front and warning behind, forcing the few of them to have no way out. The cultivator who spoke to Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, "Sect leader this matter really has nothing to do with us. Before I came, I heard that in the morning, before the World Commerce Alliance opened, the Heartless Palace's elder Feng Jiuru suddenly sent a message to the various sects managers, saying that if anyone dared to support the World Commerce Alliance, they would not give the Heartless Palace any face, and would be going against the Heartless Palace. That's all I know." Sure enough, someone was playing tricks behind the scenes. The lords of the various countries all had stern looks in their eyes. Yu Qianqiu looked at the others expressionlessly and asked, "Is what he said true?" "That's what I've heard." "I've heard the same thing," a few people said one after another. "Yunantian!" Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted. Yunantian, who was dressed in a white cloak, responded and flashed over. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and said, "Even the loose cultivators here know about such a big thing. But we didn't hear anything. If this continues, we will be eaten by others sooner or later. From today onwards, I'll leave the matter of gathering information to you. If you have nothing to do, go out and take a stroll. In the future, when the conditions are right, you have to organize a group of people specifically in charge of this matter. Our world commerce cannot be blind or deaf." "Got it." Yunantian clasped his hands angrily and said, "What should we do now? I'm just afraid that I don't know what happened. It'll be easier now that I know. Damn it. They're going too far. Do they think I'm made of clay? Just wait and see, you dog." Yu Qianqiu walked outside with large strides. "Sect Master can you let us go now?" the person who had spoken to Yu Qianqiu earlier asked. In the end, Yu Qianqiu shouted without even turning his head, "Don't leave a single one alive, kill." With this order, the trapped people immediately cried out in alarm. Someone shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, you despicable person, I'll fight you to the death." However, the lords of the various countries who were already boiling with murderous intent had already attacked first. Dozens of figures surrounded and attacked ruthlessly. In an instant, the hall was filled with the sounds of a fierce fight. With such a sudden commotion inside, the onlookers outside immediately knew that a fight had broken out. Before Yu Qianqiu could walk out of the door, Wei Chuanqiu, who was carrying a big red flower on his back, had already flashed in. Seeing the fight that had quickly ended inside, he said in shock, "What's going on?" Yu Qianqiu ignored him and walked to the area outside the door. He looked around coldly at the onlookers and shouted sternly, "Throw out the corpses for me." As soon as he finished speaking, a few mutilated and dismembered corpses were thrown out from inside. The onlookers floating in the air were instantly shocked. They didn't know what was going on with the World Commerce Association. Previously, when they were recruiting people, there had already been cases of people dying in a fight. Now, something like this happened again. Weren't they afraid that the Commerce Association Alliance would punish them severely? "Wei Chuanqiu," Yu Qianqiu shouted again. With a flash of green light, Wei Chuanqiu had already landed beside him. Before the doubt on his face had disappeared, he saw Yu Qianqiu shout angrily at the crowd. Heartless Palace's elder Feng Jiuru actually dared to openly send people to provoke our World Commerce Association in broad daylight. Smashing and robbing, committing all sorts of crimes. This is simply intolerable. This cannot be tolerated. Our World Commerce Association was forced to protect ourselves and had no choice but to kill. Bat King Wei, quickly go and invite the Commerce Association Alliance to uphold justice. Ah, how could this be? They're too daring. This heartless palace is too arrogant. The sounds of discussion in the air immediately became chaotic. Most of the people knew that Feng Jiuru had ordered the sects to blackmail them, so they were waiting here to watch the show. They wanted to see the World Commerce Association embarrass themselves. However, they didn't expect Feng Jiuru to be so daring. She actually sent people to smash and rob. This was a bit too much. Chapter 877. In everyone's eyes, World Chamber of Commerce was the weaker party compared to Heartless Palace. It was good enough that Heartless Palace didn't cause trouble for World Chamber of Commerce. At least for now. No one believed that Yu Qianqiu would confuse right and wrong to cause trouble for Heartless Palace. Therefore, after hearing Yu Qianqiu's indignant shout, everyone felt that Feng Jiuru had crossed the line. They all thought that Heartless Palace was too arrogant to cause trouble in hallucinatory Immortal City. This was a slap to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's face. For a moment, both in the open and in the dark, the comments condemning the Heartless Palace immediately caused an uproar. But no one suspected that Yu Qianqiu was talking nonsense. "Feng Jiuru, that little bastard?" Wei Chuanqiu glared at him and said angrily, "This is too much. I'll go kill him now." The old bat was also irritated by her words. With him here, Feng Jiuru, a junior, dared to come and make trouble. How could he be so shameless? "Stop." Yu Qianqiu grabbed Wei Chuanqiu, who didn't know the details, and said loudly, "They are the biggest sect in the immortal realm. They have the right to disregard the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's rules. But we don't have the right to be rude and unreasonable like them. Quickly go to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and ask someone to uphold justice." He secretly scolded, "Old bat, don't ruin my plan. Do as I say." Wei Chuanqiu was startled. Then, he waved his sleeve and turned into a stream of light, heading to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Yu Qianqiu's words caused the discussions in the surroundings to reach a climax. The Chamber of Commerce Alliance represented the Immortal Palace. Disregarding the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was a huge accusation. If these words were to spread, it would be a headache for the Heartless Palace. Some people in the crowd had changed their expressions and retreated quietly. The people of World Chamber of Commerce also stood at the gate angrily to express their silent protest. Yu Nantian, who was beside Hu Changshou, slightly tilted his head and transmitted his voice. "Only the torture envoy dares to do such a big thing. If it were us, we would have to think twice." "That's right." Hu Changshou sent a telepathic message to Meng Qi. "The torturer is going to wrestle with the Heartless Palace. To be honest, I'm a little worried. After all, they're the #1 sect in the immortal world. What are you afraid of? At worst, we can just return to the human world. If we can't do it in the open, we can still have a chance to develop in the dark." Yu Nantian replied disapprovingly. "As for those individual cultivators just now, although you don't belong to any sect and neither side is involved, why did you come here for no reason? Alas, it's their bad luck to run into a torturer who doesn't play by the rules. I feel sorry for them. In the inner room of the Passionless Palace's branch, Feng-Jiru sat on the high seat, while the 4 leaders of the 4 islands of the lake, Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan sat on either side of her. The 4 of them were originally from the same sect, and the 4 islands of Lake Light were originally one family. Later on, because their master died at the hands of an enemy, a dispute arose between the 4 of them, and they all wanted to be the sect leader. As a result, a good sect was split into 4, and became 4 families. The 4 islands of Lake Light were within the main sphere of influence of the Passionless Palace, and they had always followed the Passionless Palace's lead. However, that didn't mean that they would throw away their lives. When they heard the summons, they hurried over. At first, they didn't know what it was for. When they arrived, Feng-Jiru asked them perfunctorily, "Who is willing to snatch the territory of the world commerce?" When the 4 of them heard this, their expressions changed drastically. They weren't fools. The matter of Yu Qianqiu killing the disciples of the Passionless Palace in the ruins of God was already known to the world. It could be considered as a feud with the Passionless Palace. Coupled with the news that the world commerce was about to open, they immediately understood that the 4 of them were going to become tools for others to use. If it was to deal with an ordinary person, the 4 of them might fight to do it. With the support of the Passionless Palace, in addition to the fact that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't that great, they could also obtain a piece of land that was famous in the immortal world. It could be said to be a wonderful job. However, this Yu Qianqiu wasn't ordinary. He had the Green Wingbat King and the White Cloud Mountain Master by his side. If they really snatched Yu Qianqiu's territory, then they might as well hide in the illusory immortal city for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, how would the 2 early-stage immortal emperor experts let them off? No matter how good the territory was, it wasn't as important as their own lives. No matter how Feng-Jiru talked, the 4 of them were still vaguely unwilling to nod in agreement. Seeing that the soft approach didn't work, Feng-Jiru didn't hold back anymore. She directly used a hard threat and said bluntly, "Everyone, we have no choice in this matter. If those 2 old monsters want to kill you, my Passionless Palace is still confident that we can protect you. However, if my Passionless Palace wants to kill you, those 2 old monsters definitely won't be able to protect you. Everyone better think clearly. Don't do things that you shouldn't have done." Since she had already said it to this point, the 4 of them really had no choice but to reluctantly agree. However, they had a stomach full of complaints. "Since your Passionless Palace isn't afraid of those 2 old monsters, why did you still ask us to torment you? Can't your Passionless Palace handle it yourself?" What they didn't know was that this matter was completely done by Feng-Jiru herself. It wasn't a decision made by the upper echelons of Passionless Palace. With Feng-Jiru's late-stage great immortal cultivation, let alone 2 old monsters, any old monster would be able to kill him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have so many scruples. Now Feng-Jiru wanted to do a better job and show off her abilities, so that the higher-ups would think highly of her. In addition, she saw that the 4 of them were not very determined, so she wanted to show off the might of the Heartless Palace. Thus, before the World Commerce Association opened, she sent a message to the sects, advising them not to support the World Commerce Association. Otherwise, they would be going against Passionless Palace. At this time, the news that came back from time to time showed that the sects were indeed afraid of Passionless Palace's power. No one dared to support the World Commerce Association. Feng-Jiru proudly boasted to the sect masters. Her disciple Sun Luan also flattered her from time to time. The 4 sect masters were secretly shocked. They didn't expect Passionless Palace to be so powerful. It was far beyond their expectations. A simple warning was enough to make the sects in the immortal world not dare to act recklessly. Thus, the 4 of them slowly smiled and flattered her. At this moment, the disciple who had happily delivered the news suddenly stood outside and shouted for Branch Master. Sun Luan was slightly surprised when he saw this. He cupped his fists at the few people and came out to send a voice transmission to that disciple. Did something happen? That disciple hurriedly told him about what happened to the World Commerce Association. Sun Luan was a little confused after hearing it. He immediately felt that his master was overconfident and caused trouble. Originally, he didn't think that there was a need to waste effort on a Yu Qianqiu. If there was a decree from the upper echelons, then it was a different matter. There was no need to find trouble for himself. Go back and keep an eye on them. Sun Luan waved the disciple away. He felt that the situation was serious, and he couldn't hide it anymore. He immediately returned to Feng Jiru's side and told her what happened. The smile on Feng Jiru's face slowly froze. The 4 islands sect masters looked at each other, not knowing what happened to make this confident elder lose her composure. Feng Jiru, who was stunned for a moment, suddenly smashed the newly changed tea table into pieces. She stood up and shouted angrily, "How dare you slander this old man? Come, follow me to see." In the inner room of the Wan Gutong branch, Wang Gai, Huafeng, Du Nanshan, and Yadonglu were all seated. Not only them, there were a few more people. Master Ye and Shui Mingqing, Hua Lianqing and Hua Yunlong, Du Kairan and Du Feng, and Wan Ling were also in the room. The last 3 pairs of master and disciple, or father and son, had taken the initiative to come to the sect to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Firm. It could be said that they were prepared to give Yu Qianqiu a great deal of face. Hua Lianqing and the others hadn't expected Yu Qianqiu's momentum to develop so fiercely. He had actually managed to establish a world commerce firm on his own, and had even made quite a name for himself. They were acutely aware that this was a good opportunity, because Yu Qianqiu had a good relationship with their sons or disciples. If they could use this opportunity to raise the status of world commerce firm, as long as Yu Qianqiu wasn't stupid, he would appreciate this favor and naturally deepen his relationship with their sons or disciples. This was undoubtedly beneficial to Yu Qianqiu, but it was also very beneficial to the juniors like Hua Yunlong. For these juniors, the competition within the sect was fierce. If they were on the same starting line as their peers in the sect, they would already have a close relationship with the sect leaders of other sections. This was definitely something that would give them extra points in the sect. If World Commerce Firm's status in the immortal world was higher, Hua Yunlong and the others, who had a good relationship with sect master Yu Qianqiu, would naturally stand out among their peers in the sect. This problem seemed complicated, but it was actually very simple. For example, the position of deacon in Chaotian Palace would be given to anyone with similar conditions. There was a time when they needed to purchase some urgently needed immortal herbs, and World Commerce Firm happened to be selling them. However, World Commerce Firm purposely raised the price, or didn't want to sell them. Because Shui Miqing had a good relationship with World Commerce Firm's sect master Yu Qianqiu, Chaotian Palace sent Shui Mingqing to talk to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu finally sold the immortal herbs to Chaotian Palace for the sake of their friendship. Chaotian Palace benefited from this, so they naturally had to look up to Shui Mingqing. Like Master Ya and the others, they wouldn't give up an opportunity to help their son and disciple pave the way. So this group of people came. Wan Ling was different from everyone else. She was forced to come by her grandfather. A group of people were originally going to World Commerce Firm to congratulate them, but who knew that Feng Jiuru would suddenly issue a warning. As a result, a group of people postponed the congratulation. As a result, they gathered together and waited for a while. It wasn't that they were afraid of Feng Jiuru, but they wanted to see how Yu Qianqiu would deal with this. If Yu Qianqiu couldn't even get past this, they wouldn't go to congratulate him. Although they weren't afraid of Heartless Palace, there was no need to offend Heartless Palace for a useless person. Feng Jiuru was actually certain of this. She predicted that everyone wouldn't offend Heartless Palace for a mere Yu Qianqiu, so she dared to be so arrogant. Chapter 878. In reality, Wang Gai didn't want to care about Feng Jiuru's bullsh *T warning. As the largest chamber of commerce in the immortal realm, it wasn't far from the Heartless Palace. Most importantly, Wan Buoxing had told him that he couldn't treat Yu Qianqiu lightly. However, unexpectedly, Wan Ling stopped him from congratulating and told him to wait and follow the crowd. They would do what everyone else did. Wang Gai thought it was strange, but he knew that Wan Ling was sent by Wan Buoxing. She was the one who could make the decision. As for the reason, Only Wanling knew. She didn't like the Heartless Palace for a long time. But she didn't expect the Heartless Palace to make a move on the secret agent sent by the Immortal Emperor. She was delighted and looked forward to the scene of the Immortal Palace taking care of the Heartless Palace. The elders sat across from each other and chatted casually. The younger ones were polite and answered questions. Du Feng, Hui Yunlong, and Shui Mingqing were much more casual with each other, because the three of them were friends. However, the three of them were much more polite to Wanling. They all remembered how Wanling had held Yu Qianqiu's hand in front of everyone. They didn't know what the relationship between her and Yu Qianqiu was. Although these people stayed here, they never stopped receiving news from the outside. They were always aware of the World Chamber of Commerce's movements. If there was anyone who was really worried about Yu Qianqiu, it was probably Shui Mingqing, because he vaguely knew that there was an unknown power behind Yu Qianqiu that would be of great help to his future development. Once he left Yu Qianqiu's help, it wouldn't be long before the fake halo above his head was exposed. At that time, he would lose his foothold in Skyward Palace. Therefore, after Shui Mingqing knew that Feng Jiuru was going to deal with Yu Qianqiu, he was very anxious. He was a little distracted when he talked to everyone. Just as everyone was patiently waiting, the latest news about the World Chamber of Commerce arrived. All the disciples told them about Yu Qianqiu's furious actions in detail. After they heard the latest news, all of them looked at each other with dumbstruck expressions, and Wang Gui said with astonishment, "This Yu Qianqiu is quite audacious to kill people in Illusory City again. But this Feng Jiuru is even more daring. She actually dares to openly smash and rob in the World Commerce Association. She really doesn't place the rules of the Commerce Association Alliance in her eyes." Sitting cross-legged opposite him, Ye Donglu slowly shook his head and muttered, "Why do I feel that something is wrong? Feng Jiuru might be arrogant, but she was not arrogant enough to go against the Immortal Palace. Was she? Openly smashing and robbing in the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce, unbelievable. What's so unbelievable about that? That guy is too arrogant. Otherwise, why would he do something like warning the sects? Does he really think that his Heartless Palace has the final say in the immortal world?" Huafeng chuckled and said, "Normally, small sects would be afraid of Heartless Palace's power and wouldn't dare to make a sound. But this Yu Qianqiu is quite interesting. He's a person who can't tolerate sand in his eyes. Feng Jiuru sent people to provoke him, but he was even more ruthless. He didn't place Heartless Palace in his eyes at all. He directly killed the people Feng Jiuru sent, and still wants to complain to the Commerce Association Alliance. This time, Feng Jiuru is playing with thorns. This Yu Qianqiu is not to be trifled with. I'm afraid he'll ruthlessly bite him, enough to make him suffer." Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. At this time, Du Kairan stood up and said to Du Feng, "We should go congratulate that friend of yours for opening his business." Yafuzi also stood up and said, "That's right. Yu Qianqiu is alone and weak. He needs someone to support him, lest someone bullies him." They laughed again, and left one after another for the World Commerce Association. However, Wang Gai, Huafeng, Ye Donglu, and Du Nanshan didn't go. Since their respective sects had sent representatives, there was no need for them to join in the fun. Instead, they returned to their own territories. Yu Qianqiu stood alone in front of the World Commerce Association's building with his hands behind his back. He stood there motionlessly, his slightly closed eyes flashing from time to time. His big red robe was exceptionally eye-catching. "Get out of the way!" An angry shout came. The crowd of onlookers in the air suddenly quietened down and made way for him. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and saw 6 people standing in the crowd that had parted. 2 blue-clothed men were at the front, and the elder in the lead pointed at him and shouted angrily, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu's brows moved slightly, vaguely guessing who it was. He immediately sneered and said, "You're that old man Feng Jiuru who deliberately made life difficult for my World Commerce Association? How dare you?" Sun Luan shouted. Feng Jiuru was so angry that she laughed and said, "What an arrogant brat." The master and disciple landed in front of Yu Qianqiu. Feng Jiuru pointed at the mutilated corpse on the ground and said aggressively, "Why are you framing this old man?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I'm framing you? Damn it. I didn't even know who you were before this. I was even eager to avoid your heartless palace. It's more like I have nothing better to do. Only a ghost would frame you." The surrounding people nodded inwardly, deeply agreeing with Yu Qianqiu's words. Unless Yu Qianqiu was tired of living, he wouldn't deliberately frame Feng Jiru. The news that Feng Jiru had released against Yu Qianqiu was true. The lords crowded at the entrance of the World Commerce Association building were sweating in their palms. What if they angered the other party by spouting nonsense so unscrupulously? Feng Jiru suddenly realized that she was too agitated and had lost her poise. She immediately took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She took a step forward and said arrogantly, "Brat, it's impossible to get away with making irresponsible remarks. This old man isn't that easy to frame. If you can't produce evidence, then shut up. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." "Old man, how dare you threaten me in front of so many people? Do you think the World Commerce Association is run by your heartless palace?" Yu Qianqiu retorted, almost spitting at the other party's face. Seeing that the other party was about to flip out again, he immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Before the World Commerce Association sends someone over, I have the right to remain silent. The World Commerce Association will decide what's right and wrong. I won't keep you company." He flicked his sleeve and turned to leave. "Stop right there," Feng Jiru shouted. No soul formation cultivator had ever dared to speak to her like this. She had just calmed herself down, but she instantly exploded again. In the end, Yu Qianqiu shouted even louder than her. He turned around and pointed at Feng Jiru's nose and roared, "This is my territory. If you don't want to stay, then scram. Anyway, shut up. I'm warning you, old man. If you dare to threaten me again, I will treat your threat as a serious provocation under the watchful eyes of everyone. I have the right to launch a counterattack, and when that happens, the responsibility will not be on me." There was an uproar in the air. Everyone felt that Yu Qianqiu had gone too far. Feng Jiru also laughed and said disdainfully, "Then I'd like to see how you're going to fight back." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and turned to the top of the building. He cupped his hands and shouted, "Mountain Master Bai Yin, thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, a white light landed beside him. A pair of sharp eyes stared at Feng Jiru. As soon as Yin Peng appeared, the entire place fell silent. Feng Jiru's pupils contracted as if someone had grabbed her by the neck. She couldn't say a word. Only then did everyone remember. How could they have forgotten about this person? This guy was famous for being a cold-faced killer many years ago. He was much colder than the green-winged Bat King. "How about I kill you?" Yin Peng asked simply. His sharp eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at Feng Jiru. Feng Jiru's expression froze. She cupped her hands and said awkwardly, "So it's Mountain Master Bai Yin. Please forgive me." "How about I kill you?" Yin Peng asked simply again. Even though it was the same question, everyone shuddered. They suddenly felt like Yin Peng was like a half-drawn sword. He began to emit a faint killing intent, and the surrounding temperature dropped slightly. Feng Jiru slowly retreated with a stiff expression. "Mountain Master Bai Yin, my heartless palace doesn't seem to have any grudges with you. Why do you have to bully us?" Her disciple Sun Luan also retreated with a pale face. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yin Peng with admiration. He thought to himself, "So it's more frightening when you speak in a straightforward manner." "Stop!" A cold shout suddenly reverberated in the air. 4 streams of light descended and appeared. Wei Chuanqiu walked out from the group of 4 and came to Yu Qianqiu's side. He pointed at the thin golden-robed man and said, "I've invited the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's great bright will-bearer to uphold justice." Yu Qianqiu immediately bowed. He had heard of this man, but had never seen him. He knew that this man was the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's leader. After Yin Peng and the thin man exchanged a glance, they turned into streams of light and returned to the World Commerce Alliance's rooftop. It was obvious that Yin Peng was unwilling to face this man. Feng Jiru heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly cupped her hands and bowed to the thin man. "Greetings, great bright will-bearer." Sun Luan also bowed. When Wei Chuanqiu saw Feng Jiru, he immediately pointed at her and shouted, "Little B****, how dare you jump on my head? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go back then." I would have killed you directly. Everyone immediately heard a story from his words. The corner of Feng Jiru's mouth twitched. Seeing the great bright wheel beside her, she knew that nothing would happen. She immediately gathered her courage and shouted, Bat King Wei, please watch your mouth. Wow. Now it's terrible. Wei Chuanxiu let out a strange cry. He flipped his claws out of his sleeves and disappeared on the spot. As Feng Jiru turned pale with fright, she saw the great bright wheel's golden sleeve point out 2 fingers, and a dazzling silver plate with a diameter of 2 meters suddenly appeared from the fingertips, like a bright moon, protecting Feng Jiru. Dong! A muffled sound rang out. Although it was not loud, it seemed to pierce through everyone's eardrums, causing them to tremble and go limp. The silver plate suddenly flashed with a strong white light, bouncing back a green light. When the green light appeared, Wei Chuanxiu could not control his body and slid backward. His feet were like iron plows, creating a deep ravine. Chapter 879. A white light flashed and the bright moon disappeared. De Mingluan said indifferently, Wei Chuanxiu, do you think I'm a decoration? Wei Chuanxiu waved his sleeves and forcefully stopped. His thighs had already sunk into the ground. Then, he jumped out and pointed at Feng Jiru. De Mingluan, this bastard sent people to World Commerce Hall to smash and rob, and you didn't care. Instead you attacked me. Is this the rule of your Commerce Hall alliance? De Mingluan crossed his sleeves over his stomach and said indifferently, If you want to solve it yourself, why did you have to drag me out? Wei Chuanxiu's neck thickened, and he wanted to argue, but he was pulled back by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the trench in the ground and said painfully, Who did I offend? There are always people coming to make trouble when I establish World Commerce Hall. It's fine if Heartless Palace came to make trouble, but why did you join in as well? A good piece of land was turned into this by you. Are you going to pay for the repair? Wei Chuanqiu's expression froze and he said in shock, Look at the situation now. You still care about this little bit of money? Everyone was speechless. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, If it wasn't for money, why would I waste so much effort to establish this commerce hall? At this time, there was a slight commotion in the crowd in the air. Several figures landed on the ground. They were none other than the representatives sent by Wan Gutong and the other 3 sects, Wan Ling and Du Kairan, who brought their disciples. World Commerce Hall's opening has alarmed De Mingluan's representative? Du Kairan said in surprise. He had already cupped his hands in greeting. He wasn't pretending to be surprised, but he really didn't expect the representative of the Commerce Hall Alliance to come. The others also followed suit and saluted. However, their attention was soon attracted by the exposed corpses on the ground. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with complicated expressions. De Mingluan nodded slightly and said, What are you 4 sects doing here? Are you here to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Hall? Du Kairan's representative answered, Manager is wise. We are here to congratulate Yu Qianqiu on the opening of the World Chamber of Commerce. The others also nodded in agreement. When he said this, the expressions of everyone present varied. The De Mingluan looked at Yu Qianqiu with deep meaning. Feng Jiru, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on her face as she kept her mouth shut. It was obvious that these families were not giving her any face. Yu Qianqiu immediately cupped his hands and laughed. Welcome. Welcome. A warm welcome. Please come inside. I will go and thank you after I have settled a small matter here. Hu Changshu Yunantian, come and entertain the guests. While speaking, he nodded to Shui Mingqing and the other friends. The gate, which was blocked by the lords of the kingdoms, was suddenly empty. The 2 groups of people with big red flowers on their chests formed an 8 shape again. Hu Changshu and Yunantian came together and waved their hands to invite the guests. Hua Lianqing waved his hand and said, There's no need to stand on ceremony. Since it is just a small matter, it is fine for us to wait. Yu Qianqiu, why did people die here? What exactly happened? This question was a little fake. Everyone knew that these people couldn't possibly not know what happened here. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, My World Commerce Association is opening for business today, and a few scum who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth suddenly came to my place to smash and rob. I naturally couldn't sit by idly, and immediately took countermeasures. Who knew that these people couldn't take a beating, and spilled everything in order to save their lives? So there is a mastermind behind this. Such a thing actually happened in the hallucinatory immortal city? Yafuzi looked at Yu Qianqiu with a frown and said, "Who is the mastermind? Who is so daring? They simply don't put the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance in their eyes." Yu Qianqiu opened his claw and took a head from the ground into his hand. He lifted it up and said, "This person said that they were sent by Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace." "Nonsense!" Feng Jiru immediately roared and defended herself. "Don't listen to his nonsense. This brat is deliberately framing me. I didn't do such a thing at all." De Mingluan said calmly, "Since you didn't do it, then let him finish. The truth can't be faked, the lies can't be true. No one can frame you." Once he spoke, Feng Jiru immediately lost her temper. She could only grit her teeth and stare at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu coughed and continued while holding the head. He said that Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace, was not only the mastermind behind this matter, but also the one who caused trouble during my World Chamber of Commerce's recruitment last time. He also said that not only that, Feng Jiru also sent a warning letter to the various sects, threatening them not to come and support my World Chamber of Commerce. She wants to make a fool out of us. Just as he finished speaking, he heard Du Kairan sneer and say, "I don't know about the other things, but Elder Feng sent a warning letter to my spirit cultivation sect. I can testify to this. As for whether or not he warned the other sects, we'll have to ask everyone. My Skyward Palace also received Elder Feng's warning." Yafuzi said indifferently. Hua Lianqing nodded and said, "My Mythical Fire Palace also received it." Wan Ling cupped her fists and smiled. "Elder Feng also took care of my Wan Gutong." After these people interjected for a while, the onlookers immediately sighed. This undoubtedly proved that Feng Jiuru was the one who did all these things, and they all thought that Feng Jiuru was going to be in trouble this time. Feng Jiuru's expression also changed greatly. She realized that sending a warning letter to the various sects was indeed too stupid. For a moment, she was very nervous and couldn't help but secretly observe the changes in De Mingluan's expression. Wei Chuanqiu stared at Feng Jiuru with a sneer. Although Yu Qianqiu had a sincere expression, he was also gloating in his heart. He thought to himself, "This is the result of provoking me." However, to everyone's surprise, De Mingluan looked around and said, "I've also heard about Feng Jiuru sending a letter to threaten the various sections. Moreover, there are so many witnesses. It seems like it's not fake. The conflict between your sects and the various merchant houses has never stopped. It's normal for threats to come and go. As long as you don't violate the rules of the illusionary immortal city, my merchant house alliance won't interfere. If we want to interfere, we will only interfere with those who brazenly violate the rules." Yu Qianqiu was pondering what these words meant when he suddenly heard someone calling him. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Here. Other than your world merchant houses people, did anyone else see these dead people smashing and robbing in your world merchant house?" De Mingluan asked. Yu Qianqiu was startled and felt that something was wrong. He looked around, and it seemed too late to find an outsider to testify. He gritted his teeth and replied, "I don't know if anyone else saw it. I'm afraid that even if someone saw it, they would be afraid of Heartless Palace's despotic power and wouldn't dare to stand out to testify." De Mingluan lowered his eyes and sighed softly. "Since there are no outsiders to testify, why did you kill all these people? Even if only one was left alive, he would be a good witness. Now that there are no witnesses, do you want me to believe your world merchant house's side of the story?" As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately felt the wind change. Feng Jiru's expression was somewhat overjoyed. She didn't know why this person in charge of the Merchant House Alliance wanted to help her. They had never interacted before. Could it be that he had a deep relationship with the sect? At this point, De Mingluan's calm tone suddenly became stern. "In the future, don't bother me with things without evidence. I'm not a selfless judge, and don't have the time to distinguish right from wrong. My Merchant House Alliance knows what to do. Now that someone has pulled me here, I can't just go back without doing anything. Because what I'm seeing now is someone brazenly violating the Merchant House Alliance's rules. Yu Qianqiu, how dare you kill people in hallucinatory Immortal City twice in a row? Are you looking down on my Merchant House Alliance's rules? Everyone was silent. Du Kairan and the others who had come to see Feng Jiru's misfortune were all stunned. Feng Jiru's spirits rose. She didn't expect that she would gain the upper hand in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. How did the ending turn out like this? He immediately cupped his hands and explained, "Leader is wise. My world merchant house only wants to do business honestly. However, the wind won't stop when the tree desires peace. Seeing that someone has come to kill my world merchant house, can't my world merchant house protect itself? Did I say that you can't protect yourself?" On Deming Luan's thin face, under his thick eyebrows, his eyelids flickered with a bright light. He said in an imposing manner, "You have Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng here. Is there a need to kill a few soul formation cultivators? You don't even want to leave any evidence that's beneficial to you. Do you want my Merchant House Alliance to work for you? Do you think the Merchant House Alliance is something you can order around? Ask the entire immortal world if there's such a good thing?" His words made Yu Qianqiu speechless. He could see that Feng Jiru had already made up his mind. No matter how glib your tongue was, Feng Jiru had everything under his control. The situation was completely under his control. It was useless no matter how you tried to reason with him. Feng Jiru had absolute strength. If he said that Yu Qianqiu was wrong, then Yu Qianqiu was wrong. If he said that Feng Jiru was wrong, then she definitely couldn't be right either. This was what it meant to be a king. All ghosts and monsters couldn't withstand a single blow. But this way, Wei Chuanqiu couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, "Deming Luan, according to what you said, we can't get away with killing people in self-defense." Deming Luan looked at him and said indifferently, "Since there is indeed a reason for this, I won't pursue it." But he suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the crowd. "If anyone dares to disregard the rules of the Merchant House Alliance again, I don't care who is right or wrong, I will punish them severely." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly in his heart. What a powerful guy. He and Feng Jiru had been arguing for a long time, but neither of them had gained the upper hand. Instead, he had let everyone see his majesty, and took the opportunity to warn everyone. Wei Chuanqiu, who was ready to argue with Deming Luan, was also speechless. He didn't expect Deming Luan to pick it up, and then put it down gently. He was so angry that he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't say what he wanted to say to Feng Jiru with Deming Luan. Chapter 880. She didn't even look for your World Chamber of Commerce to settle the score. So how could you expect her to look for Feng Jiru? Wei Chuanqiu stared at the big Ming Luan, the mustache on his lips trembling. He then raised his head to look at Yin Peng, who had left the building as soon as possible. He realized that Yin Peng was still the smart one, trying his best not to interact with the big Ming Luan. At this moment, a flying shuttle flying above the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce attracted everyone's attention. The flying shuttle slowly descended, and on it stood two golden-robed men, and a petite beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu, who had been tormented to the point of losing his temper, was slightly startled. He couldn't help exchanging glances with Shui Mingqing and the others, because the woman standing on the flying shuttle was none other than Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. When Mu Tianjiao saw Yu Qianqiu, she smiled sweetly and nodded. Her gaze fell on the corpse on the ground, and she couldn't help but be stunned. When she saw that there were people wearing the clothes of the Immortal Palace present, she was even more baffled. After the three of them got off the flying shuttle, one of the golden-robed men whispered a few words to Mu Tianjiao, while the other quickly put away the flying shuttle. The three of them walked together to the Great Bright Wheel and saluted. "Greetings, Great Bright Wheel Bearer." Deming Luan nodded slightly, and looked at Mu Tianjiao suspiciously. "This young lady looks unfamiliar. May I know who you are?" There were too many people in the Immortal Palace. He didn't even know who the two golden-robed men were, let alone Mu Tianjiao, because he had never seen her before. "This junior is Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Mu Tianjiao bowed respectfully. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings immediately became restless. It turned out that this woman was the woman of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong. Those who didn't know her immediately memorized Mu Tianjiao's appearance, so that they wouldn't do anything stupid in the future. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng's expressions were somewhat bitter. Oh! De Mingluan immediately understood and said with a faint smile. So it is Wu Xiong's wife. There is no need to say junior. Wu Xiong and I have a close relationship, and we are all on the same side. If you continue to call yourself junior, Wu Xiong will realize that he is a generation lower than you, and will not be happy. Hehe, why are you here? A complicated look flashed across Mu Tianjiao's eyes. She cupped her hands and said, Yu Qianqiu and I are friends. I heard that the World Chamber of Commerce is opening, so I came to congratulate you. Hearing this, many people felt a chill in their hearts. They no longer dared to look down on Yu Qianqiu. This Yu Qianqiu had undoubtedly formed a relationship with Wu Xiong. De Mingluan was startled. After sizing up Yu Qianqiu, he smiled and said, Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. When you have time, come visit the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. After greeting them, he glanced at Wei Chunqiu and left with his two subordinates. As soon as he left, the oppressive atmosphere immediately became relaxed. Yu Qianqiu winked at Hu Changshou and Yu Nantian, and the two of them immediately went to deal with the bodies on the ground. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his hands at the people who came to congratulate him. Thank you for your support. Please come in. The few of them looked at Mu Tianjiao, wanting her to leave first. Although her cultivation wasn't much, her current status was extraordinary. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. She took out a gift box from her storage bracelet and offered it to him. This is a small token of my appreciation. I wish Sect Master you luck in opening the Chamber of Commerce. Hehe. I've spent a lot of money. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he received it with both hands. He inadvertently touched a few of Mu Tianjiao's fingers. He didn't feel anything, but Mu Tianjiao's hand trembled slightly. Just as Yu Qianqiu stuffed the gift box into his storage pouch, Wan Ling also came over with a gift box. She said with a smile, Just a little something. Sect Master Yu, the World Chamber of Commerce's business is booming. Then Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng also presented their congratulatory gifts. Yu Qianqiu smiled like a flower and thanked them profusely. You're too polite. Please come in. Everyone, please come in. He waved his hand and impolitely stuffed the gifts into his storage pouch. Under his guidance, the people who came to congratulate him stepped into the building curiously. Wei Chuanqiu didn't leave. He stared at Feng Jiuru and warned her with a voice transmission. You're lucky today. If you have the ability, you can hide in the hallucinatory immortal city for the rest of your life. If you dare to take one step out of the hallucinatory immortal city, I'll immediately cut off your head to use as a cushion. Feng Jiuru's expression was dark and gloomy as she gritted her teeth. She had lost a lot of face today, and had undoubtedly lost the face of the Heartless Palace. If the sect got wind of this, they would inevitably be out of luck. Not only that, Wei Chuanqiu just had to threaten to kill her. Since that was the case, no one would have an easy time. Feng Jiuru slowly put her hands behind her back. Her gaze swept across the 4 islands sect masters in the sky, and she calmly transmitted her voice to them. Now it's your turn to make a move. Whoever kills Yu Qianqiu can obtain this territory. My Heartless Palace will also strongly support his development. Lan Hao and the other 3 looked at each other with an indescribably bitter expression. Everyone had seen everything that had just happened. Even Feng Jiuru herself couldn't do anything to the World Chamber of Commerce. So what could they do? That's right. The rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance allowed a sect master to challenge another sect master. But if they really did such a thing, judging from Wei Bat King's temper, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Excluding this point, even Wu Xiong's wife had come to support Yu Qianqiu. Could they afford to offend such a person? What? Are you afraid? Or do you want to go back on your word? Feng Jiuru warned sternly. Either you didn't agree to me in the first place, or don't even think about going back on your word. Otherwise, don't even think about returning to the 4 islands of Lake Light. I'll send people to take good care of your families. This was a naked threat. The four of them were shocked when they heard this. Lan Hao replied angrily, Elder Feng, aren't you going too far by doing this? Is this your personal intention, or the intention of the Heartless Palace? Heartless Palace is the #1 sect in the immortal world. I've never heard of Heartless Palace using other people's families to threaten people. There aren't many reasons, Feng Jiaoru indifferently said. If anyone can kill Yu Qianqiu while challenging him, not only can they obtain this mountain, I will also do my best to facilitate the unification of the 4 islands of Lake Light. From then on, there will only be one sect master in charge of the 4 islands of Lake Light. That's all I have to say. Do as you see fit. As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Jiaoru suddenly looked into the sky. She saw figures landing one after another. Judging by their clothes, they were obviously disciples from various sections. She even knew many of them. They were all walking towards the entrance of the World Commerce Association. The 2 rows of people at the entrance with big red flowers on their chests hurriedly welcomed them. Feng Jiaoru was so angry that she almost vomited blood. This was called a broken drum beating. Those sects who were watching at first saw that the World Commerce Association had stabilized the situation and immediately came to join in the fun. Every time they went to a sect, it was undoubtedly a slap to Feng Jiaoru's face. Feng Jiaoru angrily stared at the 4 sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Inside the lobby, there was a pool decorated with mountain spring water. There were fluorescent stones at the bottom of the pool, allowing people to clearly see the small fish swimming in it. There were crystal counters all around. All kinds of immortal herbs lay quietly inside. There were also fluorescent stones placed sporadically in the cabinets. It looked very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu used the layout of the exhibition hall from his previous life. He especially strengthened the lighting effect created by the fluorescent stones. Those who had never come in before would have their eyes light up when they saw it for the first time. This kind of environment was the most attractive to women. Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao's eyes lit up when they walked in. They kept shaking their heads as they looked around. Every time they walked in front of a crystal cabinet, the 2 girls' attention wasn't on the immortal herbs inside. Instead, they were more focused on admiring the psychedelic colors reflected by the fluorescent stones and the crystal cabinet. The only fly in the ointment was that there had been some fighting in the lobby. Some places had already been damaged, but they had already been cleaned up. A few of the men who had come to support Yu Qianqiu saw the decorations inside, and their expressions became solemn. They could all see the value of this place, and it would definitely increase people's desire to buy it. Thus, they began to carefully observe every layout in the building. The desire to learn was in their eyes. You made the decorations here? Mu Tianjiao asked Yu Qianqiu, who was leading the way and introducing the place. Hehe. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce worked together. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly as they walked. Mu Tianjiao didn't think that his subordinates would have such foresight. She smiled and said, I really couldn't tell. First there were waterfalls, then there were tall buildings, and now there are these attractive decorations. You really are extraordinary. Yu Qianqiu casually said a few polite words and laughed it off. However, it was precisely because of this conversation that Mu Tianjiao took a few more glances at his subordinates. She immediately discovered that many of them were acquaintances she had seen before. This discovery surprised Mu Tianjiao a little because she had seen some of them in the Divine Ruin realm. Weren't they people that Shui Miqing had gathered from various sects to help? How did they become Yu Qianqiu's subordinates? Shui Miqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng didn't pay attention at first. As faces flashed past their eyes, they gradually recognized some people. The 2 of them looked at each other in dismay. Shui Miqing was a little nervous, afraid of being exposed. Fortunately, neither Wan Ling nor Master Yu knew these people. Yu Qianqiu had just led these people to the staircase and was about to take them to the 2nd floor to continue their tour when they suddenly heard a faint voice saying, "Welcome," from outside. Everyone stopped and looked over. They saw a large group of people walking in. After coming in, they began to look at the crystal cabinets. They didn't look like people who were going to cause trouble. Huo Lianqing laughed and said, "It seems that all the sects have sent people to support us. I reckon that Feng Jiuru's expression isn't good right now. Who knew that just as he finished speaking, a loud shout suddenly came from outside. Yu Qianqiu, come out! Yu Qianqiu, come out! It was shouted several times in a row. It seemed that several people were shouting at the same time, causing the lobby to reverberate continuously. Clearly, they were using their cultivation to make this sound. Damn it! Who is wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves? Yu Qianqiu muttered. The voice was very unfamiliar, so it should be someone he didn't know. He quickly rushed out of the lobby and saw 4 people standing in a row not far from the door, looking at him. The various feudal lords outside the door also indicated that it was them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but frown and ask, "Why did you call me out?" Chapter 881. Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan looked at each other with complicated expressions. In just a short while, a large group of people had already rushed out of the gate, especially the green-winged bat king Wei Chuanxiu, who was looking them up and down with an unfriendly gaze, making it difficult for them to speak. You know them? Wei Chuanxiu turned around and asked. When he saw Yu Qianqiu shake his head slightly to indicate that he did not know him, he immediately turned around and glared at him. Where did this bastard come from? Why are you shouting here? Feng Jiuru, who was floating in the air, sneered. Lan Hao, who was below, took a deep breath and said, "The 4 of us are the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Unfortunately, we have taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Chamber of Commerce, so we have come to challenge the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu." These words immediately caused a commotion. Those who knew them knew that they had always followed the lead of the Heartless Palace, so they quickly looked at Feng Jiuru in the sky and understood what was going on. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was startled. He did not expect that this troublesome matter would fall on him. Wei Chuanxiu checked the 4 cultivators and found that they were all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. Thus he sneered and said, "You know that I am here, but you dare come here to cause trouble? I don't think you fellows have the guts to do so. Tell me honestly, who sent you fellows here?" Her words immediately reminded everyone, and they all turned to look at Feng Jiuru in the air. Ning Zixuan cupped his fists and said, "I've long heard of Bat King Wei's great name. The 4 of us wouldn't dare to cause trouble. It's just that we've taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Commerce Association. In addition, sect leader Yu's cultivation isn't high and our 4 sects are poor and can't afford to buy a mountain. So we have no choice but to challenge sect leader Yu." Her words were so direct that Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Although he had guessed that Feng Jiuru was behind this, it was obvious that she thought he was a pushover. Wei Chuanxiu was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. The lords of the various countries had also heard about the sect master's challenge, and they looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Su Yuchang cupped his fists and said, "Sect leader Yu, I'm sorry. Please follow us to the Life and Death Mound." The so-called Life and Death Mound was the one and only place in the illusory immortal city where one could fight, and its purpose was for the various sect leaders to challenge each other. Back when the Merchant Alliance set up this place, many people felt puzzled. Why didn't they allow people to fight in the illusory immortal city, but allowed the sect masters of the various sects to challenge each other? Everyone's gazes gathered on Yu Qianqiu. Yafuzi and the others looked at each other helplessly. They hadn't expected to encounter such a thing, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. Because this was the rule of the illusory immortal city, no one was allowed to interfere in a battle between sect masters. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at such a blatant challenge, which was allowed by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. He secretly sent a message to Wei Chuanxiu. How are their cultivation levels? Their cultivation bases are not high. They are all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. There was a hint of ridicule in Wei Chuanxiu's voice. Damn it. Of course it's not high for you. Yu Qianqiu coughed and waved his hand at Lan Hao and the rest. All right. Disperse. I refuse to accept your challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings went silent, and everyone revealed expressions of disbelief as they looked at him. This was the first time they'd heard of such a thing in Illusory City. This fellow really isn't afraid of losing face, because everyone in my sect is watching. Yu Qianqiu didn't feel any pressure at all. He continued to wave at everyone. Everyone, welcome to my World Merchant Association. Everyone do what you need to do. Today, my World Merchant Association will be selling immortal herbs. All immortal herbs will be sold at half price. Everyone is welcome to purchase them. The lords didn't feel any pressure. They straightened the big red flowers on their chests and waved at everyone. Please come in, please come in. Everyone looked at each other. They found that as long as one was willing to lose face, everything was easy to do. Trouble would be solved in an instant. They all moved their feet and rushed inside. Wei Chuanqiu stared at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. He found that this guy's nonchalant expression didn't seem to be fake. His skin was really thick. Lan Hao and the rest didn't expect things to end like this. After being dumbfounded, they all became wild with joy. This was Yu Qianqiu's own refusal to challenge them. They couldn't be blamed. The four of them immediately looked back at Feng Jiuru in the air, with a helpless expression. They were all prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiuru's expression was distorted. She mocked loudly in the air. A dignified leader of a sect is actually afraid of battle and death. I think your World Merchant Association should just close down, so that you don't embarrass yourself here. No matter how rational a person was, once they flew into a rage out of humiliation, they would always do unreasonable things. Feng Jiuru was like this. It seemed that if she didn't tear Yu Qianqiu into pieces, or torment him to the point that he was too ashamed to show his face, she wouldn't be able to vent the anger in her heart. Lan Hao and the rest's expressions changed greatly. Anyone could tell that Feng Jiuru was provoking Yu Qianqiu. In an instant, everyone stopped and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Facing the pressuring gazes from all directions, Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable all over. He coughed and asked Wan Gai, Elder Wan, you also know that I hate fighting and killing the most. Is it embarrassing for me to refuse someone else's challenge? The lords were deeply suspicious of Yu Qianqiu's words that he hated fighting and killing. However, they were all on the same side, so naturally no one would expose it. Wang Yi smiled awkwardly. It's really hard to say, but you're the first sect master in the history of the psychedelic immortal city to refuse a challenge. Hehe. Don't worry, no one can force you to do something like this. Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding. He then waved at everyone and said, Everyone, please come in and do what you need to do. Don't pay attention to the mad dogs barking outside. Now that things had escalated to this point, the two sides would definitely fight to the death, if there was an opportunity. However, because everyone had scruples in the psychedelic immortal city, Yu Qianqiu didn't plan to give Feng Jiuru any face. Most importantly, even if he gave her face, she wouldn't appreciate it. She would only take a mile when given an inch. Yu Qianqiu never did this kind of thing. Everyone looked at Feng Jiuru in the sky with strange expressions. They knew that he had lost a lot of face today. Not only did he lose his own face, but he also lost the Heartless Palace's face. They were afraid that the Heartless Palace wouldn't let him have a good time when he returned. This was equivalent to messing things up. Yu Qianqiu. A fierce shout came from the sky. Feng Jiuru said aggressively. If you're afraid of death, just say it. If you don't dare to accept the challenge, then admit defeat in front of everyone. Don't think about bluffing your way through. Even if you hide today, I guarantee that there will be people coming to challenge you every day. If you have the ability, then hide for the rest of your life. Be a coward for the rest of your life. His voice shook the surroundings. He was clearly angry out of humiliation. The people from the various sects looked at him in surprise. They couldn't understand. The situation was very clear. The more he made a fuss like a shrew, the more face he would lose. Why did he have to do this? It was obvious that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't accept the challenge. Little B** starred. Looks like he's really eager to die. Wei Chuanqiu snorted coldly. His eyes were already filled with killing intent. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and said through gritted teeth, That's right. He's eager to die. As soon as he said that, to everyone's surprise, Yu Qianqiu leaped into the sky in a flash. He pointed at Feng Jiuru and shouted angrily, Old dog. You're really tired of living. Don't think that I don't know that you're the one who instigated the 4 islands of Lake Light. It's none of your business whether I accept the challenge or not. If you can't stand it, then go back to your heartless palace. What the hell? Why is the heartless palace full of scum? Scram. Don't embarrass yourself in my territory. The torturer was about to fly into a rage. The lords of the various countries exchanged glances. Everyone knew that this was how Yu Qianqiu behaved in the human world. Once he flew into a rage, there was nothing he wouldn't dare to do. Everyone couldn't hide the worry in their eyes. The difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. In fact, Yu Qianqiu's safety was related to everyone's interests. The people of the various sects were speechless when they heard that. This Yu Qianqiu was indeed angered. He was already speaking without thinking. It was enough to target Feng Jiuru. Why did he have to drag the Heartless Palace into this? Once the Heartless Palace was angered, the consequences were not something that Yu Qianqiu or the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce could bear. Feng Jiuru's eyes were burning with excitement. She shouted, Yu Qianqiu, how dare you insult my Heartless Palace? Don't give me that. You're already so old, yet you're still bringing out your backer. Even I feel ashamed for you. You're pestering me like a shrew. Yu Qianqiu slapped his chest and cursed. My words are as hard as nails. I dare to say it, so I dare to accept it. I'm insulting your Heartless Palace. How can a place like you come from? Pfft. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Yin Peng, who was silently observing the situation from the rooftop, stared at Yu Qianqiu with a sharp gleam in his eyes. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes also lit up. He stroked his mustache and muttered, How dare you insult the Heartless Palace like this? Grandpa's cowardice wasn't in vain. Yafuzi, Wang Gai, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. He was too impulsive. He was still too young. Mu Tianjiao's mouth was slightly agape. A man's courage was often the easiest thing to move a woman. Only Wan Ling had a matter-of-fact expression on her face. How could a trusted spy of an immortal emperor be afraid of the Heartless Palace? In truth, Yu Qianqiu was indeed enraged. However, he was not too impulsive. Feng Jiru was simply going overboard with her pestering him time and time again. She had actually said that there would be people coming to challenge them every day. At this point, there was basically no room for reconciliation with the Heartless Palace. Instead, it was better to take things one step at a time. Since he was destined to have a conflict with the Heartless Palace, there was no point in enduring it anymore. He couldn't die a coward, right? Even if he died, he had to die with a bang. He couldn't let others look down on him. He was someone who cared about his reputation. Feng Jiuru wasn't angry. Instead, she laughed happily. Yu Qianqiu's words were enough. Even if Yu Qianqiu didn't accept the challenge today, it would give the Heartless Palace a chance to teach him a lesson. She chuckled. Don't pretend to be so daring. Someone who doesn't even dare to accept the sect master's challenge has no right to insult the Heartless Palace. He's just a coward who's afraid of death. Chapter 882. Well said. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and shouted. If that's the case, you old dog shouldn't be afraid of death like me, right? Everyone exchanged glances with the people around them. Even Feng Jiuru felt that there was a trap in his words, but she was angered by the continuous insults. Feng Jiuru's mouth twitched, and she carefully responded, At least, if I'm the leader of a sect, and I'm challenged by a sect leader in this city, there's no reason for me to be a coward. It seems that you're really not afraid of death. Very well, I hope you're really not afraid of death. After a cold snort, Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. Since you're not afraid of death, how about we make a bet? As long as you agree to this bet, I'll accept the challenge of the 4 of them at all costs. With that said, he waved his arm and pointed at Lan Hao and the others below. Countless pairs of eyes widened, and countless pairs of ears pricked up. Feng Jiuru's eyes flickered, and she hesitated, worried that it was a trap, but Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, What? You don't dare? At this point, Feng Jiuru had to find a suitable reason to retreat, so she gritted her teeth and said, What bet? A domineering aura suddenly erupted from Yu Qianqiu's body. His tiger-like eyes widened as he scanned the crowd around him. He didn't even look at Feng Jiuru as he pointed a finger at her and said vehemently, "I'll bet your worthless life. If I lose, you can have my head, and I won't regret it. If I win, I'll end your worthless life with my own hands. You're the one who started this, and you're the one who kept pestering me. Do you dare to bet your life with me?" There was silence all around, and only his words echoed in the air. It was really domineering. No one expected that he, who had shamelessly refused the challenge before, would take the initiative to accept the challenge. And he even said that he would bet his life with Feng Jiuru. With such courage, who would dare to say that he was afraid of death? Now it was up to Feng Jiuru to accept the challenge. However, everyone believed that Feng Jiuru would not refuse. If she wanted to take Yu Qianqiu's life, this was the perfect opportunity. One had to know that Yu Qianqiu was only at the spirit-severing stage, while the Four Islands sect masters were at the late exalted immortal stage. If any one of them came out to challenge Yu Qianqiu, it would be hard for him to survive. Those who were concerned about Yu Qianqiu were all on tenterhooks. Mu Tianjiao's hands were clenched tightly. This was especially true for the feudal lords who had followed Yu Qianqiu to the celestial realm. They were both nervous and excited. They wanted to see the strongest torturer in the human world fight against an immortal from the celestial realm. But they were also afraid that something might happen to Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu died, they would never be able to return to the human world. Many of them still had family members in the human world. Why wouldn't I? Since you're courting death, don't blame me. Feng Jiuru kept sneering. He couldn't think of a reason to refuse. He didn't believe that a cultivator at the late stage of supreme immortal realm couldn't defeat a cultivator at the soul formation realm. They were on completely different levels. Besides, if he didn't dare to accept it, then what he said before would be no different from farting. If he didn't have the guts to accept it, then the Heartless Palace's face would be bitten by dogs. By then, the Heartless Palace would skin him alive. The surroundings immediately became lively. Everyone knew that there was going to be a good show. There were also many people who looked at Yu Qianqiu sympathetically. In the end, he was still forced into a dead end by Feng Jiuru. How could a small world chamber of commerce fight against the powerful Heartless Palace? They didn't even need to do anything. 4 sect masters, Sect Master Yu has accepted the challenge. The next step is up to you. Feng Jiuru smiled at Lan Hao and the others. The 4 of them looked at each other and flashed into the sky. They waved their hands and said, "Please." "No hurry." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Feng Jiuru raised her brows and said, "Why? Do you want to go back on your word?" Yu Qianqiu snorted and said, "I'm afraid that someone will go back on his word, so I have to find a witness who can restrain both sides." Feng Jiuru looked down at Wei Chuanxiu and said mockingly, "Indeed, we should find a witness to prevent someone from going back on their words, just because their cultivation is higher." Her meaning was obvious, and she was probably referring to Wei Chuanxiu. Wei Chuanxiu flashed into the sky and shouted at Feng Jiuru, "Little bastard, who are you talking about?" Feng Jiuru couldn't be bothered to touch his brows and kept silent. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "I'm afraid only the Great Radiance Will Executor can make decisions in this illusory immortal city, and only the Great Radiance Will Executor can effectively supervise our bet. Bat King Wei, can you invite the Great Bright Will Keeper to be a witness?" As soon as these words came out, not to mention the others, even Feng Jiuru was a little surprised. She looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. She didn't know where he got the confidence to ask the Great Bright Will Keeper to be a witness. It should be known that if he, Yu Qianqiu, lost, he wouldn't even have a chance to go back on his word. If the Great Bright Will Keeper agreed, it would definitely not let any of the losers escape. Similarly, Feng Jiuru couldn't escape. Wei Chuanxiu was slightly surprised. In fact, Feng Jiuru had guessed his thoughts. If Yu Qianqiu lost, he was confident that he could save Yu Qianqiu's life. But if the Great Bright Will Keeper was present, he couldn't save him at the critical moment. Boy, are you crazy? Are you really confident that you can deal with those 4 T sect masters? Wei Chuanxiu secretly transmitted his voice. I can even deal with you. Are you afraid that I can't deal with them? Nonsense. If I hadn't been careless and let my inner core fall into your hands, Killing you would be easier than killing an ant. Do you think that my purple fire can't deal with the 4 of them? I admit that the power of the purple fire is very terrifying. But the way to fight is to adapt to the situation. Sometimes, no matter how good an external object is, it can't decide the outcome. After all, your cultivation is too low. That if you insist, I won't stop you. Just return my inner core to me first. If something happens to you and I can't find my inner core, I'll be screwed by you. Damn. It seems that you don't have confidence in me, Yu Qianqiu said in a bad mood. Let me ask you, are you sure that the 4 of them are at the late exalted immortal stage and not great immortal stage? Wei Chuanqiu looked at Lan Hao and the other 3 suspiciously and replied, I have good eyesight. I'm sure that none of the 4 of them are above the late exalted immortal stage. From what you said, are you confident that you can deal with immortal cultivators below the great immortal stage? Don't worry so much. Just help me invite the great bright wheel to be the supervisor. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided not to tell him the reason. He remembered that when he was attacked in the granite mountains last time, the hunchbacked old man said that only experts who had reached the great immortal stage could resist his absorbing star's great technique. Since the absorbing star's great technique could deal with these 4 guys, there was no need for him to reveal his other trump cards. The 2 of them looked at each other without saying a word. Anyone could see that they were secretly communicating with each other. The longer Feng Juru waited, the more worried she became. She was afraid that she would be taken advantage of, so she shouted, Aren't you going to invite the great bright wheel? What are you waiting for? If you want to go back on your word, just say it. Wei Chuanqiu stared at him and said, Little bastard, you will cry. Just you wait. Then she turned into a stream of light and flew toward the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Feng Juru gave Lan Hao and the others a look. The 4 of them cupped their hands at Yu Qianqiu and said, See you at the life and death mound. They flew away first. Feng Juru sneered at Yu Qianqiu and flew after them. The surrounding people were in an uproar, and they all flew toward the life and death mound. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the pairs of eyes below and said indifferently, Don't join in the fun. Look after the house. These clowns are not worth mentioning. I will go back after I deal with them. The lords immediately cupped their hands and said, Goodbye, sect master. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to fly away quickly. Master Ye, Mu Tianjiao, and the others immediately chased after him. The life and death mound was actually a rocky hill at the edge of the fantasy immortal city. It was not small. Rocks of all sizes were scattered all over the place. There were no trees, but there were many tenacious weeds growing in the cracks of the rocks. Some were green, some were withered, and some were yellow. It was a barren land. It could be seen that there had been a fight here from some of the broken rocks. However, it should have been a long time ago. In fact, there had not been a fight in the life and death mound for a long time. The sect masters of various sects were allowed to challenge each other here. However, once it reached this stage, it would almost always end in a fight to the death. Therefore, this place was called the Life and Death Mound. Some people jokingly called it the graveyard of the sect masters. Almost no one would challenge each other unless they had no other choice. This was because the consequence of doing so was not only defeating the other party, but also forming a deep hatred with the other party's entire sect. The gains often did not make up for the losses. Therefore, very few people would do this. Now the life and death mound, which had been barren for God knows how many years, suddenly became lively again. Figures landed around the life and death mound. Even the leaders of the various sects who had not appeared in the World Chamber of Commerce before showed up to watch the show. Feng Jiuru looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had arrived late. To her, Yu Qianqiu's flying speed was not worth mentioning. She turned around and smiled at Lan Hao and the others beside her. Let's not talk about anything else. Just his speed is enough to play him to death. Her disciple Sun Luan smiled. Lan Hao and the others could only awkwardly laugh a few times. Yu Qianqiu looked down. When he saw Feng Jiuru, he landed beside her. Master Ye and the others, who had flown with him, also landed. The two enemies looked at each other and could not be bothered to look at each other. They silently waited for the witnesses to arrive with their hands behind their backs. After Wan Ling landed and looked around, she accidentally met the eyes of a woman not far away. She immediately smiled and nodded in greeting. This woman was none other than Long Xiaojie, the granddaughter of Hidden Dragon Villa's elder, Duke Long Yu. Elders Duke Long Yu and Guang Juanru were also present, as well as the latter's grandson Guang Nianzu. They had originally wanted to go take a look at the World Chamber of Commerce's opening. Coincidentally, Feng Jiuru had sent a warning message. Therefore, like the other sects, they wanted to wait and see, so they did not appear at the World Chamber of Commerce. Now, like the other sects, they had all come to watch the show. When Long Xiaojie saw Wan Ling's provocative greeting, she immediately gritted her teeth in anger. Her face was deathly pale, and her delicate body trembled. The hatred of having her husband stolen surged into her heart. She wanted nothing more than to devour her flesh and bones. Chapter 883. After all, Wan Ling and the others were standing not far from them. In addition, they came together with the attention-grabbing Yu Qianqiu and the others. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor naturally saw Wan Ling, and subconsciously noticed Long Xiaojie's abnormal behavior. In the entire Hidden Dragon Manor, Guang Nianzu was the only one who did not dislike Wan Ling. If it was not for Wan Ling stealing his love, Long Xiaojie would have been married a long time ago. She would not have had the chance to marry him. Jiu don't lose your composure, and let others laugh at you. Duke Long Yu frowned, and transmitted his voice. Guang Juanru sighed softly, and turned her head to look elsewhere. Out of sight, out of mind, Long Xiaojie tried her best to control her emotions. She no longer looked at Wan Ling, who was grinning and showing off her strength. Her gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with Feng Jiuru. She bit her lips and no one knew what she was thinking. Just as everyone was waiting patiently, someone suddenly shouted, "They're here!" Everyone looked in the same direction, and saw a green flowing light, and a golden flowing light, shooting over at an unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye, they flew over everyone's heads. They had no intention of stopping at the life and death mound, and went far away in an instant. Everyone looked at each other. Many of them could tell that the two flowing lights were Wei Chuanxiu and the Great Bright Luan. However, what was strange was that the Great Bright Luan seemed to be chasing after Wei Chuanxiu. In terms of speed, it seemed that Wei Chuanxiu was slightly faster than the Great Bright Luan. "Wei Chuanxiu, stop right there." The Great Bright Luan's angry roar came faintly from afar. What happened? While everyone was confused and shocked, they saw a green and golden flowing light make a turn in the distant sky and fly back here. It was also at this moment that white crescent moons suddenly burst out from the golden light chasing after it. They circled around and strangled the green light with a thunderous momentum. More than a dozen moons drew strange arcs in the air as they chased after the green light that was rapidly escaping. "Great Bright Luan, you actually played for real." Wei Chuanxiu's exasperated voice came from the sky. The two of them flew to the sky above the life and death mound once again. The green light that Wei Chuanxiu had transformed into did not seem to want to escape anymore. In an instant, the green flowing light flashed with a dazzling speed and created countless flowing light mirages. It shuttled back and forth and dodged the dozens of thunderous moon wheels. That miraculous speed of dodging caused everyone to gasp, and all of them sighed in their hearts. As expected of the Azure Wing Bat King, that was skilled in speed in the immortal dimension. If it was any other person, that person would have probably perished beneath the lunar wheel that possessed shocking might. After a series of twists and turns, the dodging green light in the air found a gap and quickly teleported away. By the time everyone found Wei Chuanxiu, she was already hiding behind Mu Tianjiao, her clothes in a mess. She was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. "Wu Xiong's wife, on account that Yu Qianqiu is your friend, quickly tell this madman to stop." Mu Tianjiao looked at him speechlessly. She also knew her own limits. How could she have the qualifications to order around the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's Great Bright Wheel? She really could not ask for this favor. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so powerful full moon discs came crashing down with a thunderous momentum, scaring the people down below. Just as they were about to flee, the full moon discs suddenly stopped and quickly bounced back into the sky. However, The powerful pressure that came with it just now still forced many people to stagger. The rocks under their feet were sent flying everywhere. Even after he stopped, the momentum was still astonishing. With a flash of golden light, the great bright wheel appeared in the sky. It converged into dozens of white lunar wheels and drilled into his arms. The great bright wheel glared at Wei Chuanqiu below with murderous eyes. If it was not for Mu Tianjiao, it would not care how many people were standing below, and whether it would hurt the innocent. It would have already killed them all in one fell swoop. Hee. Wu Xiong's wife still has a lot of face. Wei Chuanqiu cupped his hands towards Mu Tianjiao to express his gratitude. He then laughed at the great bright wheel in the sky. Great bright wheel. I knew you would give Wu Xiong face and not lay a hand on his woman. You bastard. So many years have passed and you're still so useless. What kind of ability is it to rely on a woman to protect your life? The great bright wheel pointed at him and shouted angrily. If you have the ability, come out and see if I don't skin you alive, you bat. Everyone could see that Wei Chuanqiu was definitely up to no good, and had angered the great bright wheel. Otherwise, the great bright wheel would not have personally chased after him. From their words, it could be heard that the two of them had known each other for many years. Previously, when Wei Chuanqiu was able to invite the great bright wheel to the Chamber of Commerce, many people had this guess. However, they were still fine last time. How did they fall out this time? Some of the elders in the immortal world might know that Wei Chuanqiu, Yin Peng, and the great bright wheel were inseparable friends. Later, the three of them were noticed by the immortal palace, and wanted to recruit them into the immortal palace. It was also because of this that the three of them had a disagreement, and parted on bad terms. In the end, the great bright wheel joined the immortal palace while Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng continued to roam freely in the immortal world, not wanting to be bound by others. What everyone did not know was that Wei Chuanqiu was able to invite the great bright wheel to the Chamber of Commerce because of their past relationship. Otherwise, how could a normal person invite the powerful great bright wheel? However, what made the great bright wheel unhappy was that not long after he returned to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, Wei Chuanqiu came to ask him to be some bullshit witness, which he immediately rejected. Wei Chuanqiu begged a few times to no avail, and was a little angry. He could not help but kick the great bright wheels, which made the great bright wheel fly into a rage, and the two of them immediately fought. This fight almost caused the experts of the entire Chamber of Commerce Alliance to surround and attack Wei Chuanqiu. Fortunately, the great bright wheel remembered their past relationship, and did not let others interfere. After they started fighting, Wei Chuanqiu could not help but be convinced that, just like before, he was still no match for the great bright wheel. He could only take a beating, and had no choice but to escape. Due to his talent, although Wei Chuanqiu was no match for the great bright wheel, he was faster, which led to the scene everyone saw. What are you arguing about? Do you think I like to see your stinky face? Wei Chuanqiu pointed at Mu Tianjiao indignantly and said, If it wasn't for Wu Xiong's friend asking me to invite you, who the hell would go find you? When he said this, Mu Tianjiao stared at Wei Chuanqiu dumbfounded, as if asking what did this have to do with her. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched, and he touched his forehead weakly. He had to admit that this old bat was even more shameless than him. Everyone looked at Wei Chuanqiu speechlessly, and could not help but admire this guy. Only he dared to talk to the great bright wheel's owner like this. The great bright wheel was startled when he heard this. He looked at Mu Tianjiao, and immediately reacted. He was almost confused by Wei Chuanqiu's words. It was so complicated, but it had nothing to do with Mu Tianjiao at all. It was nothing more than Yu Qianqiu asking him to invite him. Shameless guy. Get out here. The great bright wheel roared angrily. Wei Chuanqiu laughed, and could not be bothered with him. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, I have already invited the person for you. As for whether he agrees or not, it is not something I can control. You guys do as you see fit. After saying this, he tidied up his messy hair and clothes. Damn it. What an old scoundrel. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. But now was not the time to argue with the old bat. He immediately turned to Feng Jiuru and sneered. The great bright wheel's owner has come as you wish. If you have something to say it quickly. She doesn't have time to wait for you. He deeply understood that he was not that big. It was better to leave such a big vat to the senior. Everyone in the surroundings almost fainted upon hearing this. And all of them looked at Feng Jiru sympathetically. She was really unlucky to have run into these two shameless people, one big and one small. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Wan Ling was also speechless. How could the Emperor Immortal's trusted spy be like this? Wei Chuanqiu winked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile, as if he was praising his adaptability. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu wanted to kick him to vent his anger. He wanted to kick this incompetent guy to death. Feng Jiru, who hadn't expected to be blamed on her, was stunned. Then, her expression changed drastically as she looked at the great bright wheel. She waved her hand and said, "It has nothing to do with me. It was Yu Qianqiu who came up with the idea to invite you here." "Bullshit," Yu Qianqiu scolded. "How dare you say that you didn't give permission? Under the watchful eyes of so many people, you still dare to lie through your teeth? Damn it. Is your heartless palace shameless?" Feng Jiru was a little panicked. Thinking that she had given permission, she did not know how to defend herself. She was so anxious that her forehead was covered with sweat. Enough! As the owner of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, the Great Bright Will was not someone who could be easily fooled. He stared at Yu Qianqiu coldly and shouted, "Ever since you came to the psychedelic immortal city, you have been playing all kinds of tricks. There has been no peace in the psychedelic immortal city. Don't put labels on others. Do you think I'm easy to fool?" Everyone looked at each other and realized that the owner of the Great Bright Wheel was indeed not easy to fool. Hearing this, Feng Jiru's heart finally relaxed, and the eyes she looked at Yu Qianqiu became even more resentful. "Owner, you've wrongly accused me." Yu Qianqiu looked as if he had suffered a great injustice, but before he could defend himself, he heard Deming Luan shout, "Shut up." Then he looked at Wei Chuanqiu and said, "Didn't you want me to be the supervisor? Fine. I'll be the owner. It's good that this kid dies early, so you don't have to come out and embarrass yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, he landed beside Wei Chuanqiu in a flash, giving Wei Chuanqiu a fright. In the end, he saw that Deming Luan was not moving at all, and did not seem to have any intention of making a move. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and mumbled, "Take off your pants to fart, what an unnecessary move." Deming Luan quickly swept a glance at him, then looked around and shouted decisively, "Begin!" The people at the side subconsciously moved a few steps away from the Great Bright Wheel. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face turned cold. He tilted his head to look at Feng Jiru and the others. He then flew directly to the center of the rocky hill. Chapter 884. This barren rocky hill was jokingly called the sect leader's graveyard. Who knew how many sect leaders had lost their lives here? The past had become history, and the fallen could not be resurrected. Only the luxuriant weeds stubbornly took root here, giving this place some life. Very few sect leaders would come to this ominous place. But after many years, the story of this place was about to repeat itself. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly on a relatively flat rock, staring calmly at Feng Jiru and the others. Suddenly, the wind became stronger, and the weeds between the rocks began to sway. They seemed to have sensed something, and the withered weeds flew into the air, and no one knew where they would land. Under Feng Jiru's secret, almost frantic urging, Lan Hao and the others had no other choice. But before they came, the estrangement caused by the fight for sect leader had been resolved. They knew that even if they won, the experts of the World Commerce Association would not let them return safely to the 4 islands of Lake Light. But they had no choice. Feng Jiru would not let them return safely either. Furthermore, she had threatened them with their families. Thus they made an agreement among themselves. If any of the 4 of them were lucky enough to return, they would take the tokens of the sect masters of the 4 islands and restore the 4 islands to a single sect. At the same time, they would also entrust their families to them. Although the World Commerce Association allowed the sect leaders to challenge each other here, they did not allow a group fight. In other words, each challenge could only be one-on-one. Bao Tuxing flashed out from among the 4. He floated in the air and looked down. Yu Qianqiu also looked up, and their gazes met. The former's gaze was indifferent. He clearly did not think it would be difficult to defeat Yu Qianqiu. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In fact, Yu Qianqiu knew that as long as he was vigilant, he could escape at any time, and no one could catch him. But he also knew what today's battle meant. This was a hurdle for the World Commerce Association. If he escaped, it would be equivalent to losing, and the territory he had painstakingly built would be handed over to someone else. This was something he would never allow. So he would never run away from today's battle, unless it was absolutely necessary. Since he accepted the challenge, he had to win. There were more than 300 pairs of eyes watching him from behind. As the #1 expert in the world, he could not disappoint them. At the same time, he recalled the scene when he parted ways with Bai Changchun in front of the gate to the underworld. He had promised Bai Changchun that he would not let him down. Yu Qianqiu's clothes were fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, Du Karen's voice resounded in his ears. Yu Qianqiu, be careful. The people of the 4 islands of Lake Light are proficient in the art of controlling water. Although I've never met them before, I'm sure they must have some tricks up their sleeves. Water manipulation technique? Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that his chances of winning had increased by a few notches. He shouted towards the sky, "Come!" Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes immediately focused on it without blinking. She seemed a little nervous. De Mingluan tilted his head slightly to look at him. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with confusion. When Bao Tuxing saw that Yu Qianqiu did not have anything in his hands, and was fighting him with his bare fists, his hand that was reaching for his storage bracelet stopped. He said indifferently, "The difference between our cultivations is too big. I'll let you make the first move." His words sounded as if he wanted Yu Qianqiu to accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He did not say anything else. He knew that he could not be careless when fighting with such an opponent. If he was hit by the opponent, he could lose his life. He estimated the distance between them. It was a few hundred meters. With his current cultivation, he could only lock onto an opponent within 50 meters. Even if the opponent broke into his range, if the opponent was too vigilant and dodged too quickly, he would not be able to lock onto the opponent in time. In that case, he would not be able to find a chance to use the absorbing star's great technique. The difference between their cultivations was too big. Sneak attack was still the best way. Yu Qianqiu gradually clenched his fists. His perception surged into the ground from under his feet like a tide, and quickly spread to the surroundings. With his current cultivation, he was still unable to use his perception in the air. He needed a medium to transmit his perception. However, the vast ground was his best medium. Everyone could tell from the minute changes in Yu Qianqiu's body that he was about to make a move. As he slowly spread his arms, everyone felt as if the ground was trembling along with his arms. When everyone clearly saw that the rocks on the rocky hill were shaking, they were immediately shocked. This scene was too shocking. Anyone who saw a large area of rocks vibrating would be shocked. How could this be? Everyone was in disbelief. It was as if Yu Qianqiu's movement and frown had already affected the entire rocky hill. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had already reached such a high level? This was not something a soul formation stage cultivator could do. Could it be that he was deliberately hiding his cultivation? No wonder he dared to challenge the Heartless Palace. Wei Chuanqiu was stunned. Then he excitedly rubbed his hands. This guy really had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. The great bright wheel was still calm. However, his attention was completely focused on Yu Qianqiu. Bao Tuxing, who was in the air, immediately raised his guard. Under everyone's gaze, he had already said that he would let Yu Qianqiu make the first move. He couldn't go back on his word. Suddenly his pupils shrank. He saw Yu Qianqiu shake his arms. A dense gray shadow suddenly shot out from the rocks that covered the mountain. They formed into a group with Yu Qianqiu as the center, and quickly circled around him. Everyone was dumbstruck. It was actually tens of thousands of stone flying swords. Within the dense gray shadow, Yu Qianqiu suddenly pointed his arm at Bao Tuxing and shouted, 10,000 flying swords. So, the sound of the air being pierced could be heard. The dense gray shadow shot towards Bao Tuxing in an astonishing amount. Regardless of how powerful it was, The scene was truly spectacular. Bao Tuxing quickly waved his palms left and right, releasing rays of multicolored light, immediately shattering the stone flying swords that were rushing towards him. After exchanging a few blows, he discovered that although the stone flying swords that filled the sky looked astonishing, they were actually unable to withstand a single blow. He immediately snorted coldly. I thought it was some kind of powerful move, so it's just a show. Now it's my turn. His body turned into a silver stream of light in the air, and actually broke through the stone flying swords that were attacking him. He rushed towards Yu Qianqiu, and the hundreds and thousands of stone flying swords were unable to obstruct him at all. Such a small distance was covered in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled into a cold smile. The qi that he had set up in the air directly wrapped around Bao Tuxing, who had rushed down. He opened his claw in the air and exhaled. Star-absorbing great technique. As soon as these words came out, Wan Ling, who had been watching quietly, felt her eyelids twitch. The scene of Cang Lianqing and Chai Junlang's tragic deaths immediately appeared in her mind. Du Feng and the others, who had seen this move in the ruins of God, also watched the outcome with their mouths wide open. A cloud of white smoke suddenly burst out of the silver flowing light that was diving down at high speed, and a horrifying figure that looked like a mummy appeared. It let out a shrill howl of horror from its throat, waving its stiff limbs and desperately trying to flee for its life. However, his current speed was worlds apart from before. He wasn't much faster than the birds in the sky. Fancy? Then I'll show you how powerful I am. Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly. Facing the empty air with his 5 claws, he formed a sword technique with 2 fingers, and pointed at the corpse that was fleeing in the air. The area around Yu Qianqiu immediately exploded like a series of cannons, and streaks of green light shot out from the stones on the ground, soaring into the sky. Over 100 streaks of green light quickly caught up to the fleeing corpse. With a burst of green light, it was turned into a hornet's nest in an instant. With a crisp dang sound in the air, a storage bracelet was bounced by a green stream of light. Yu Qianqiu, who had one hand behind his back and one hand in the air, happened to grab it. Without even looking at it, he directly put it away. Almost at the same time, the hundreds of cyan streams of light returned to where they came from. With a series of pung-pung sounds, they surrounded Yu Qianqiu and shot into the ground, disappearing without a trace, leaving only smoke and dust floating in the air. Yu Qianqiu placed his hands behind his back and watched the corpse in the air fall to the ground indifferently. The stone flying swords that were still circling in the air adjusted their direction, and with a schwa-schwa sound, thousands of gray shadows shot down, and in the blink of an eye, all of them stabbed into the surroundings of Yu Qianqiu. The surging smoke gradually drifted away, and Yu Qianqiu's figure appeared in everyone's line of sight again. From beginning to end, Yu Qianqiu stood on the stone and didn't move at all. Among the tens of thousands of stone swords, he looked back, stared at Feng Jiuru, and said indifferently, "Next." The unshakable momentum of the wind and clouds was not weaker than that of a grandmaster of a generation. Feng Jiuru was inexplicably frightened by his gaze, and everyone was stunned. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu's methods would be so terrifying. Although the momentum of the tens of thousands of swords was terrifying, it was still not comparable to the palm that could directly turn Bao Tuxing into a dried corpse. If that palm was aimed at them, everyone shuddered at the thought of it. It was too terrifying. After Master Ye's generation recovered from the shock, they all looked at Shui Mingqing's generation with questioning eyes. Shui Mingqing and the others nodded slightly, indicating that this was the star-absorbing great technique that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill the disciples of Heartless Palace in the ruins of God. However, when a few elders secretly asked a few juniors about the 10,000 swords, they all expressed that they didn't know. This was the first time they had seen Yu Qianqiu use it. Although Wei Chuanxiu had been with Yu Qianqiu for a long time, it was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu use such a terrifying star-absorbing great technique. When she thought about how this guy had so many powerful killing moves hidden on him, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. Wei Chuanxiu, what is going on between you and this Yu Qianqiu? The Great Bright Will calmly asked. What do you mean what is going on? Wei Chuanxiu came back to his senses and asked in confusion. The great bright will slowly turned his head to look at him, and with a cold gaze, he said word by word, "Don't play dumb with me. Didn't you remember anything from Yu Qianqiu's 10,000 swords? It seems that I need to remind you. Myriad Swords Demon Monarch." Chapter 885. Wei Chuanxiu was startled, and immediately thought of the demon monarch, who terrorized both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, his cultivation was still shallow, and he did not have the qualifications to intervene in the war. However, he had witnessed the scene of the battle, and he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of it. Looking at Yu Qianqiu standing in the midst of the swords and smiling coldly, the scene of the swords just now did indeed give people a sense of déjà vu. This scene seemed to have been seen by the demon monarch who rode on the divine dragon. This matter can be big or small. You better explain it clearly, or else it will not benefit either of us, especially you and Yun Peng. De Mingluan warned him. Wei Chuanxiu looked at him and replied sarcastically, "What do you mean by big or small? You can't be suspecting that Yu Qianqiu is related to the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, right? Didn't the demon monarch of 10,000 swords already die in the hands of Jin Tai? What nonsense are you thinking about? I cannot think too much, but can you guarantee that the immortal emperor will not think too much?" De Mingluan snorted and said, "The demon monarch of 10,000 swords is the only one who can threaten him after the seal of the demon realm. Today, the scene of Yu Qianqiu controlling the swords will reach his ears sooner or later. As the person involved and the person in charge of this place, he will call me for questioning sooner or later. If I can't give him an explanation that will make him feel at ease, you and Yun Peng should prepare to be buried with Yu Qianqiu. I'm afraid I will not be able to absolve myself from the blame." Wei Chuanxiu fell into a short silence. He knew that what De Mingluan said was the truth. Jin Tai was a ruthless and arrogant person, and would definitely not allow anyone who could threaten his rule to exist. If he did not have a reason to feel at ease, it would indeed be a big problem. He paused and said, "I also can't explain this matter clearly. Let's ask him after this matter is over." At this moment, the remaining 3 people from the 4 islands of Lake Light suddenly quarreled, and immediately stopped the conversation between the two. This attracted everyone's attention. Everyone thought that they were afraid of death, and pushing the blame to each other. When everyone heard the content of their conversation, they all sighed with emotion. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. "If you still recognize me as your eldest senior brother, then listen to me." Following Lan Hao's angry shout, Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan lowered their heads in grief and indignation. Lan Hao extended his hand and pulled over the items that the two of them were holding. One was a silvery raincoat with a bamboo hat, and the other was a fishing net. Those who didn't know would think that they were fishing tools used by fishermen, but in fact, they were 2 of the 4 treasures of the 4 islands of Lake Light. The 4 disciples each took one of the 4 treasures: a gourd, a straw cape, a fishing net, and a fishing rod. The fishing rod was in Bao Tuxing's hands, but because he had underestimated his opponent, he was killed before he could take out his treasures. The storage bracelet with the treasures also fell into Yu Qianqiu's hands. "Eldest senior brother," Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan suddenly shouted at the same time. Their voices were a bit low. After looking at each other, the 2 of them took the 2 items from Lan Hao's hands. Su Yuchang shook open the straw cape and personally put it on Lan Hao. Ning Zixuan used a special method to wrap the fishing net around Lan Hao's arm. "I think Master will be very happy to see us like this." Lan Hao laughed heartily. Then he also took out a large gray gourd from his storage bracelet and tied it to his waist. This meant that he had 3 of the 4 treasures on him. The reason why they made such a grand scene was because the way Yu Qianqiu killed Bao Tuxing was too shocking. Bao Tuxing didn't even have a chance to resist before the outcome was decided. At this moment, in the eyes of the 3 disciples, Yu Qianqiu was definitely an expert who had hidden his cultivation. Otherwise, how could a soul formation stage cultivator be so powerful? In fact, they weren't the only ones who thought this way. Many of the onlookers thought the same, because no one could see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. When the rabbit dies, the fox grieves, and the disciples let go of their previous enmity. So they all took out their treasures and focused them on one person. They felt that this was the only way they could defeat Yu Qianqiu. Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan's eyes were filled with grief and helplessness as they watched Lan Hao fly over the life and death mound. In fact, the one who was the most worried and afraid was Feng Jiru. She never thought that Yu Qianqiu would be so powerful that he could kill Bao Tuxing so easily. If all the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light were defeated, then she would be in trouble. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but sneak a glance at the Great Bright Wheel, who was supervising the battle. Coincidentally, the Great Bright Wheel's cold gaze swept over, causing her to immediately turn around in a panic. Seeing Lan Hao in such a strange outfit, Yu Qianqiu immediately raised his guard. He didn't even need to think about it to know that Lan Hao was definitely wearing treasures. Otherwise, the disciples wouldn't have to dress so solemnly. "Junior brother, I'll take revenge for you," Lan Hao roared. He grabbed the big gourd at his waist with one arm and pulled out the stopper of the big gourd with the other. Then he slapped the gourd, and a column of water shot out from the mouth of the gourd. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed. When the column of water came out of the gourd, it was only a thin stream of water. Who knew that it would suddenly become bigger after a short distance? The water waves were like a torrential river that poured down from the sky with a rumbling sound. What made Yu Qianqiu feel strange was that the torrential waves released from the gourd did not come for him. Instead, they were like a huge water dragon that wriggled in all directions. "Yu Qianqiu, this is the water gourd of the 4 treasures of Lake Light. He's setting up the heavenly water formation. You can kill him while he's setting up the formation." Huo Lianqing of the mythical fire palace was also secretly playing the good guy. Hearing him say it so easily, as if killing a late-stage ascendant immortal cultivator was really as easy as cutting vegetables, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He was the clearest about his own strength. As long as he left the ground, he would immediately fall into a passive situation. The attack speed that he could display with his cultivation was simply not enough to catch the opponent's eyes. Even if he used his purple flames and divine sword, he probably wouldn't even be able to touch the opponent, let alone kill him. Sneak attacks when the opponent was unprepared was the way to go. Most importantly, being in the air meant that the attack range was wider, while being on the ground meant that there was more room for maneuver. At the very least, he could escape underground. He calmly watched the opponent set up the formation. In the eyes of others, they thought that he had a card up his sleeve. Who knew that he was doing this because he had no other choice? In a short while, the water dragon had entrenched itself into a huge water cube that occupied an extremely large area. The strange thing was that it did not collapse. The area within a radius of several miles had already become a vast body of water. The rocky hills were completely submerged. The onlookers had already risen into the air to watch. Everyone could vaguely see that Yu Qianqiu was still standing motionlessly at the bottom of the water. At this moment, the water gourd in Lan Hao's hand had also stopped pouring water down. Just a slight movement of the gourd would cause the waves below to surge. Clearly, it could draw in the water cube below. A cold smile appeared on Lan Hao's face. Since the opponent was so arrogant, it was obvious that he did not know the power of his water-sky formation. Then, as if he was hugging a waste drum, he used his other hand to continuously slap the body of the gourd. 2 huge waves immediately surged up from the surging waves below, condensing into 2 huge fists. They opened their palms and aimed at Yu Qianqiu at the bottom of the water. With a loud bang, they broke through the waves and grabbed at him. At first, Yu Qianqiu was a little worried. However, after staying in the water for a while, he discovered that it was only SOO. Although this part of the water seemed to be controlled by something, it seemed that his control over the water art was stronger. When he discovered that the opponent was actually controlling the water to deal with him, he was immediately speechless. He was really displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. He actually dared to play with water in front of me. Then let's play. The undercurrent carried a huge pressure as it approached. He could clearly see the 2 huge dark blue hands grabbing at him. Yu Qianqiu waved his large sleeves. The two huge hands instantly collapsed and disappeared, merging into the water. The water gourd in his hand trembled, and instantly lost contact with the two huge hands. Lan Hao was immediately shocked. In this heavenly water formation, the gourd in his hand was the master of this part of the water. The two huge hands that were condensed were not afraid of being damaged at all. This was because this part of the water could repair them at any time, and then continue to attack the opponent. As long as the opponent's cultivation was not ridiculously high, being trapped in the formation was equivalent to being trapped in an endless entanglement. However, the opponent just waved his hand casually, and immediately, and silently broke his spell. This was a little too inconceivable. Could it be that his cultivation had reached an unimaginably terrifying level? Everyone who witnessed the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although most of them didn't know much about the power of the heavenly water array, they could tell from Lan Hao's shocked expression that something must have happened that shocked him. Everyone could also see some clues from the sudden change in Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang's expressions. Lan Hao loosened his grip on the gourd and hung it back on his waist. He understood in his heart that since the opponent had dealt with it so easily, it would be useless to use water again. His figure flashed, and like a meteor, he drilled into the water below with a bang. The straw cape on his body flashed with a white light, and his entire person disappeared on the spot. This time, it was immediately Yu Qianqiu's turn to be nervous. He quickly looked around, but he could not see the opponent's figure at all. This was a little too terrifying. His perception immediately surged out like a tide and spread out. This part of the water immediately became a part of his body. F***ck. He could actually become invisible. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He instantly discovered the opponent's position, but he could not see him at all. What shocked him the most was that when his perception swept over the other party's body, it felt as if there was nothing there, as if the other party didn't exist at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he had complete control over this region of water, he wouldn't be able to hide anything from him. He would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the straw cape on the opponent's body. There must be something strange about this straw cape. After Lan Hao drilled into the water, he immediately held his breath and stealthily hid for a while. Although he was very confident in the treasured clothes on his body, he now treated Yu Qianqiu as a real expert. He did not dare to relax at all. After waiting for a while, he carefully and slowly approached. He did not dare to cause any changes in the water. He was prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Yu Qianqiu was immediately speechless. He did not expect that there would be such a shameless person. He actually dared to play a sneak attack on him in the water. He simply continued to pretend to look around blankly. More than 10 purple flame flying swords quietly burrowed into the ground under his feet. He was also prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Chapter 886. Both of them were prepared for a sneak attack. One was sneaky, while the other pretended not to know. They got closer and closer to each other. Lan Hao had a water splitter in his hand, which he hid under his straw cape. Because of the ripples in the water, everyone could not see clearly, but they could vaguely see Yu Qianqiu looking around blankly. Most people did not know what was going on behind the temporary calm. Only Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang knew the danger. They knew that their eldest senior brother was using his straw cape to hide himself, and was definitely approaching quietly to prepare a sneak attack. Their hearts were in their throats, hoping that their eldest senior brother would succeed in one strike. When the distance between the two of them was less than 200 meters, Yu Qianqiu could already feel Lan Hao slowly taking out his weapon. It was obvious that he was ready to attack. He could not help but curse in his heart. He wanted to wait for his opponent to get closer and see if he could use the absorbing star's great skill in the water. That way, his chances of winning would be higher. Lan Hao was worried that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too high, so he did not dare to get too close. He quietly stopped and was about to make a sneak attack when he suddenly heard a piu-piu sound coming from below. Before he had time to check, the water curtain in front of him had already flashed with purple light. At the same time, Lan Hao saw a trace of an evil smile hanging on the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. He was immediately shocked. His reaction was considered fast, and he immediately guessed that he had fallen into a trap. He did not care about anything else, and desperately used teleportation to escape. A dark red halo of blood spread in the water, and a hua sound rose from the surface of the water. A white light flashed, and Lan Hao appeared, quickly catapulting into the air. He held the water splitter in one hand, and with the other hand, he took out a pill and crushed it. He applied it to the wound on his thigh, and immediately stopped the blood flow. The onlookers did not see clearly what had happened. They only saw a flash of purple light under the water, and Lan Hao immediately ran for his life, and was injured. Yu Qianqiu had already kept the purple flame flying sword. He had always insisted on not exposing this thing as much as possible. It would be troublesome if someone recognized it as the purple flame. This sneak attack made Yu Qianqiu feel that it was a pity. He didn't expect that the other party would still be able to escape. Although the other party had kicked him in the leg, for an immortal cultivator, it probably wasn't a big deal. The key thing was that the other party didn't hurt his vital parts. However, this also made Yu Qianqiu realize that his judgment was correct. Based on the opponent's cultivation and reaction speed, it would be difficult for him to hurt him. If he had followed up with a purple flame berserk explosion after injuring his opponent, he should have been able to finish him off. However, if he had done that, the chances of his purple flames being recognized would have greatly increased. This was a risk that was not easy to take. At that moment, Lan Hao, who was floating in the air, had a look of bewilderment on his face. He did not expect to be discovered by the other party, even though he was wearing the invisibility cloak. This undoubtedly proved that the other party's cultivation base was very high. But the strange thing was that the speed of the purple flying swords that attacked him just now was a bit slow. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to react at such a close distance. How could the speed of the flying swords with such high cultivation be so slow? Could it be that the other party intended to let him go? That was not possible. Since he couldn't figure it out, he simply didn't want to think about it. At this point he already had no way out. Even if he didn't want to fight, he had to fight. Lan Hao's left arm shook, and the fishing net that was wrapped around his arm burst out with a multicolored light. Like thousands of strands, it expanded and stretched infinitely. With a schwa sound, it scattered into the water below. Yu Qianqiu almost didn't have time to react. He found himself surrounded by a rapidly pouncing net that was rapidly shrinking towards him. Without saying anything further, he directly burrowed into the ground and emerged from the periphery of the net that was surrounding him. Looking back, he saw that the large rock that he had just landed on had been shredded into pieces by the dense, silk-like fishing net. Yu Qianqiu was shocked on the spot. He didn't know what this thin net was made of. It was actually so sharp that it could cut through rocks like tofu. If he had been careless just now, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Lan Hao, who was in the air, could see the situation underwater more clearly than anyone else. Furthermore, this area of water was connected to the treasured gourd, so he could clearly sense the changes in the water through the gourd. Otherwise, he might have injured more than one leg when he was running for his life just now. However, once he saw it clearly, he was shocked. He had seen people burrow into the ground, but he had never seen someone burrow into a rock. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but reality was reality. The net that he had cast did not catch the other party at all. The fishing net that had retracted after a single strike quickly exploded into thousands of strands again, and burrowed into the water. In the blink of an eye, it had once again enveloped Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a toothache. This thing's ejection speed was really fast. To be honest, it wouldn't take him much effort to break this net. However, it would be a pity to destroy such a miraculous treasure. Left with no choice, he resisted the urge to burrow into the rubble to hide. As soon as he dove into the rubble, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. His opponent had played with him to the extreme. This net had actually sunk more than 10 meters into the ground. Even the person and the rock were wrapped up like a dumpling. They were coming at him from all directions. The holes in the net were also very small, so it was impossible to burrow through even if he wanted to. Damn it! I don't care about this stupid net. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. Just as the fishing net was about to wrap around him, a purple light exploded from his body, and the fishing net that was coming at him was instantly reduced to nothingness. Lan Hao immediately sensed that the treasure had been damaged. In a great shock, he hurriedly retracted his net. However, he saw that the rapidly retracting fishing net had wrapped around a rock. What surprised him even more was that Yu Qianqiu had already surfaced from the water and was staring at him coldly. "Eldest senior brother, be careful!" Ning Zixuan and Su Yuchang cried out in alarm. Following that, there was an uproar from the crowd. Lan Hao, who had been vigilant against Yu Qianqiu, slowly lowered his head. He looked at his chest in disbelief. There was a purple flying sword stuck in his chest. After the flying sword shot out from the rock that was dragged back by the fishing net, the rock broke into pieces and fell to the ground. The flying sword had been hidden in the rock when it was brought back. Because Yu Qianqiu had suddenly appeared on the water surface, Lan Hao's attention was immediately diverted from the rock. That was why he was in such a predicament. Otherwise, there was still a chance that he could have avoided it. At this moment, Lan Hao suddenly felt a burst of heat from the flying sword stuck in his chest. In an instant his heart was turned into ashes. Lan Hao could not suppress the burning pain in his heart. His blood qi surged, and he spat out a large lump of viscous blood. His eyes were wide open as he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and stuttered, "You cheated, shameless!" His body was already swaying in the air, and it looked like he could not stand any longer. "I'm not cheating, I'm just playing with you," Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said. "Instead of being a good sect master, you listen to that old dog's instigation and go against me. You should know that killing you is a piece of cake. If I didn't want to play with you, how could you have lived until now?" After he finished speaking, as if to prove his words, Yu Qianqiu landed lightly on the water surface. The moment his feet touched the water surface, a pure white frost immediately condensed on the water surface. Ka-ka, the sound of ice rapidly forming rang out. Starting from under Yu Qianqiu's feet, the pure white frost quickly spread in all directions. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly, as if the last bit of warmth that existed in this world had disappeared, leaving behind only a bone-piercing cold. In just a moment, the water cube that was surging with waves just a moment ago had already turned into a huge block of ice. A huge block of ice that took up a radius of several miles. Although the sun was blazing in the sky, the surrounding temperature was frighteningly low. The change in temperature was so huge that even these immortal cultivators could not help but shiver. Looking at the world of ice in front of them, everyone could not help but let out a breath of cold air. Each and every one of them was dumbfounded, almost thinking that it was an illusion. Yu Qianqiu stood on the crystal-clear ice surface. On the surface he looked calm, but in his heart, he was secretly rejoicing that it was just right. This was already the limit of his current cultivation, that he could turn water into ice. What surprised him the most was that when he was absorbing the surrounding temperature just now, he could faintly feel the existence of a weak purple fire element in the air. This made him fall into deep thought. Since the purple fire was the energy that supported the operation of this world, could it be that the reason why he could not see it normally was because the purple fire existed in a scattered form throughout this world? Lan Hao, whose heart meridians had been destroyed, finally could not hold on any longer. A bitter smile appeared on his face. He now believed that Yu Qianqiu was indeed playing with him. Otherwise, he would have turned the water into ice from the very beginning, and he would not have been able to play with the water at all. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Lan Hao closed his eyes, tilted his head, and fell straight down, smashing into the thick ice with a bang. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the purple fire flying sword stuck in Lan Hao's chest flew back into his sleeve. Then, he slowly walked over and put away the treasures and storage bracelet on Lan Hao's body. The surrounding crowd also landed on the huge block of ice. Many of them even squatted down to touch it, and found that it was indeed a solid block of ice. It was definitely not an illusion. There were still 3 people floating in the air. Feng Jiru's face turned pale, and now she finally believed that she had done a stupid thing. Ning Zixuan and Su Yuchang watched helplessly as Yu Qianqiu took away their eldest senior brother's belongings. The two of them almost simultaneously cast resentful gazes at Feng Jiru. If it weren't for her, they wouldn't have ended up like this. The two of them looked at each other, nodded, and then shouted in unison, "We admit defeat." After that, they immediately fled together. Feng Jiru was shocked, as if she had been struck by lightning. She suddenly turned around and shouted anxiously, "Stop. It's not over yet, stop." Seeing that she could not stop the two of them, she immediately turned into a blue light and chased after them. However, a moon suddenly appeared in the sky and directly bounced the blue light back. "Feng Jiru, do you think I'm just a decoration? If you want to leave, fulfill your bet first." The voice of the great bright will sounded in the sky. The blue light appeared, and Feng Jiru immediately cupped her hands toward the great bright will standing on the ice and pleaded, "Master, it's not over yet. The two of them haven't finished yet. I'll call them back now." The great bright wheel appeared in the sky in an instant, and with a wave of his hand, the moon retracted into his sleeve. Then, he put his hands on his abdomen and said indifferently, "They have already admitted defeat. What else is there to compete for?" Chapter 887. I have a way to persuade them to come back. Continue. I will get them back now. Feng Jiru retreated in fear. The great bright wheel's eyes suddenly opened and said in a calm tone, "Are you joking with me?" No. I will get them back now," Feng Jiru said and turned to fly away. The great bright wheel snorted coldly and revealed its palms that were hidden in its sleeves. 10 light balls shot out from its 10 fingers and chased after Feng Jiru in an instant. Feng Jiru turned around to look, and she was instantly scared out of her wits. She cried out in alarm, "Please, for the sake of the Heartless Palace." Before she could finish her words, the 10 balls of light suddenly turned into 10 huge crescent moons, weaving a net to entangle them. Feng Jiru knew it was too late to say anything. The great bright wheel was ready to kill her, so she quickly changed her position in the air. However, the 10 moons followed her like a shadow, and she could not get rid of them. Feng Jiru, who was struggling to deal with them, made up her mind and summoned her flying sword to fight back. The great bright wheel's eyes flashed fiercely and it shouted, "How dare you? How dare you resist?" He swung his palm in the air, and the 10 crescent moons suddenly appeared like illusions. They cut through the void, leaving silver arcs in the air. The power of the thunderbolt made people feel as if they were looking at a bolt from the blue. At this moment, a shrill scream rang out in the air, and a cloud of blood mist exploded in the air. 10 ghost-like crescent moons darted out of the blood mist and turned into 10 light balls. The great bright wheel waved his long sleeve and collected the light balls. He didn't stop at all. Leaving behind a cold snort, he turned into a golden light and disappeared into the distance. This scene caused everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter, especially the expressions of the elders of the various sects that held down the fort here. They'd never imagined that the damning wheel would actually be so formidable, and it would kill Feng Jiru in a fit of rage in an instant. In comparison, killing the elders was not a problem. The terror of the great bright will suddenly press down on everyone's hearts like a mountain. Even Wei Chuanqiu was slightly absent-minded. He was immersed in the demonic transformations of the 10 full moons. Putting himself in Wei Chuanqiu's shoes, he realized that it was actually difficult for him to resolve it with his own movement techniques. Only now did he understand that Deming Luan had shown mercy when it attacked him. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. Before the pieces of flesh and blood in the air could fall to the ground, Yu Qianqiu immediately dashed over. He caught one of the storage bracelets with his sharp eyes and sharp hands. After inspecting it with his divine sense, he nearly laughed out loud. Huang Xiaolong noticed that Feng Jiru was indeed worthy of being an elder of the number 1 force in the immortal world. Just the divine grade spirit stones alone numbered more than 7 billion. Huang Xiaolong wondered if these were the public funds of the Heartless Palace. However, this was not something that Yu Qianqiu was worried about. He only thought of it as his spoils of war. He looked around in satisfaction. Then without another word, he quickly flew towards the World Commerce Association. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up when he came back to his senses. Seeing Yu Qianqiu running away so quickly after winning the battle, he thought he must have made a fortune. He immediately chased after him. The two of them landed in front of the World Commerce Association's building. When the lords saw that Yu Qianqiu had returned, they were all extremely excited. Since the torture master had returned unscathed, they reckoned that they had definitely won. What's in Feng Jiuru's storage bracelets? Wei Chuanqiu eagerly followed behind Yu Qianqiu, tugging on his sleeve as he asked. Yu Qianqiu flung his sleeve and strode inside, saying, "I told you it's nothing. I've told you many times." "That can't be. Feng Jiuru is in charge of the Heartless Palace's branch here. No matter how few things he has, it can't be that little." Wei Chuanqiu expressed his doubt as he chased after Huang Xiaolong. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him. He quickly walked into the main hall and stepped onto the curved platform at the edge of the pool. He turned around and shouted to the crowd, "The trouble has been resolved for now. Keep your spirits up. I believe there will be guests coming soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the feudal lords cheered excitedly. They weren't stupid. They knew that after this matter, they had at least gained a foothold in the immortal world. On the large ice layer of the life and death mound, the spectators left one after another. Soon after, more people came after hearing the news. This barren land that had always been uninhabited suddenly became lively. After a whole month, the huge ice layer finally disappeared from everyone's sight. During this time, countless people from the immortal world had come to visit. Although the opening of the World Commerce Company caused quite a few twists and turns, it became even more lively because of this. Yu Qianqiu put on his big red robe again and welcomed guests with a smiling face in the main hall. This time, the people who came from various sects were much more polite to him. When they saw him walking over, they greeted him with some reverence. This was the embodiment of strength. Only with strength could he gain everyone's recognition. This was something that needed no doubt. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu became unfathomable in everyone's eyes. No one could see through his cultivation, but based on the fact that he could easily kill 2 late-stage immortal sect masters, everyone guessed that his cultivation had at least reached the great immortal level. However, everyone was clear that this time, the World Commerce Company had formed a great enmity with the Heartless Palace. They were afraid that they wouldn't have an easy time in the future. However, the various sects that came to support the opening were still shocked by the large variety of immortal herbs that the World Commerce Company was selling. Hence, people kept making roundabout inquiries to the various feudal lords, who had big red flowers hanging on their chests in front of the counters, to find out the origin of these immortal herbs. The feudal lords who had long since unified their statements all pushed the origin of the immortal herbs to Wei Chuanqiu, saying that Wei Chuanqiu was the one who provided them. As the various sects' disciples passed on the news, they immediately sent people with money to purchase the immortal herbs that their sects needed. The trading scene on the lower 5 floors gradually became lively. The patrolling Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. For this opening he had put in a lot of effort. All the immortal herbs he sold were below 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. He didn't take out anything that was worth more than 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. Most of the immortal herbs he sold were worth less than 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. Even so, Huang Xiaolong was still worried. He studied the immortal herbs he sold according to the illustrated handbook for a long time. As long as the handbook indicated that the immortal herbs were the main ingredient of an immortal pill, Huang Xiaolong would always sell 1 or 2 ingredients. For example, if an immortal pill required 3 main ingredients, then one of the main ingredients would definitely not be sold. If it required 4 or 5 main ingredients, then 2 of them would never be sold. Yu Qianqiu naturally had a deeper consideration for doing this. He couldn't disregard everything for the sake of money. Although the World Commerce Company's main purpose was to earn money, there were other things more important than that. Therefore, he could earn money, and he could sell large amounts of immortal herbs, but he would never allow the various sects to gather all the immortal herbs they needed. Otherwise, relying on those big sects' powerful financial strength to obtain the immortal pills they urgently needed, it would be akin to helping a tiger do evil. Of course, Yu Qianqiu didn't rule out that those big sects had the immortal herbs they needed to refine immortal pills, but it was certain that they could only make up a small portion at most. It was impossible for them to make up for all the immortal herbs he sold, unless the various sects also had a utopia in their hands. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu wasn't worried that the various sects could stir up too much trouble. He still had to continue earning the money he had to earn. After walking up and down a few times, seeing that the World Commerce Company's business was on the right track, Yu Qianqiu smiled and prepared to return to the 6th floor, because there were still guests there. Master Ya, Huo Lianqing, and Du Kairan had all left, but Shui Mingqing and a few friends were still here as guests. As the host, he had to accompany them. Just as he was about to step onto the stairs to the 2nd floor, he suddenly heard a woman shout from behind him, "Sect leader Yu." Yu Qianqiu was startled. He felt that the voice was very unfamiliar, as though he had never heard it before. He turned around and saw a man and a woman who looked relatively young walking over. Their looks weren't bad, and they looked like a perfect match. Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked suspiciously, "You two are?" The woman smiled and cupped her hands. "I'm Long Xiaojiu, and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Long Yugong is my grandfather." The man also cupped his hands and said, "I'm Ancestor Guang Nian, and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Guang Juanru is my grandfather." "Oh, excuse me. So it's the Hidden Dragon Villa's elder's grandson and granddaughter." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands politely, as though he had heard of their great names for a long time. But he was muttering in his heart. He had heard of Hidden Dragon Villa, but he had never heard of these two old fellows. He didn't know if these two little fellows were real or not. Liars often appeared in this kind of lively occasion. Thus, he was somewhat on guard in his heart, but he still wore a smile on his face as he asked, "May I know why the two Hidden Dragon Villa's great disciples have come to find me?" Long Xiaojiu smiled and took out a gift box, saying, "The two of us have come under orders to represent Hidden Dragon Villa, to congratulate the World Commerce Association on its auspicious opening and prosperous business." Guang Nianzu glanced at her. Orders were fake. It was true that she had pestered Long Yugong for half a day to agree, but he was sent to supervise her, afraid that she would see people she shouldn't see and cause trouble that she shouldn't. With a gift to receive, Yu Qianqiu was naturally happy, but he also felt that it was a little strange. He had never interacted with Hidden Dragon Villa before, so why would they come to give him a gift? Could it be that they had sharp eyes and saw that the World Commerce Association had a bright future, so they took the initiative to make friends? "Then I'll thank your villa for their good intentions." Yu Qianqiu accepted the gift, thinking that it wasn't a bad thing to have more powerful friends, so he raised his hand and said, "It's too noisy here. Two esteemed guests, please follow me to a small table on the 6th floor." Long Xiaojiu and Guang Nianzu didn't act pretentious, and followed him directly to the 6th floor. There was a person guarding the stairway to the 6th floor, obviously not allowing unauthorized people to trespass. When the guard saw that it was Yu Qianqiu who had brought people over, he naturally let them go up. Once the three of them went up to the 6th floor, they were immediately isolated from the noise downstairs. With one look, it was obvious that someone had set up a soundproof barrier. Yu Qianqiu brought the two of them through a corridor and pushed open a large door. Their eyes suddenly brightened up, and it turned out to be a large room. This was actually the living room on the 6th floor. The walls and floor were all inlaid with white jade slabs, and in addition to a few large transparent crystal floor-to-ceiling windows, the lighting was very good, making the entire living room seem spacious and bright. Chapter 888. A few rattan chairs were placed elegantly in the living room. Du Feng and the rest were either sitting or lying down as they chatted. Beside the transparent crystal window, there were two pots of devil's ivy. Wan Ling was standing there, curiously pulling the two ropes on the shutter to study it. One side of the shutter was constantly rolled up and down by her. Mu Tianjiao leaned back on a rattan chair and touched the armrest with both hands. She chuckled and said, "The simple furnishings in this living room reveal a unique elegance of craftsmanship. It's really rare." I wonder which refined scholar decorated it. Unique in unique elegance? Hui Yunlong propped up his upper body from the slightly elastic rattan chair and looked around. He chuckled and said, "A few worthless rattan chairs in an empty living room is considered elegant? Forgive my poor eyesight, but I really can't tell. But this is the first time I find this rattan chair to be quite comfortable. It's not that hard, and it's also breathable." Du Feng rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Didn't you notice that I feel much more relaxed after entering this place?" Hui Yunlong looked at himself and realized that he was lying down. He immediately sat up and smiled awkwardly. "It seems so. This is called artistic conception. It can make guests feel at home. You won't understand even if I explain it." Du Feng waved his hand in disdain. Mu Tianjiao couldn't help but smile. Hui Yunlong glared at her and wanted to argue, but he noticed that Yu Qianqiu had brought two people over. Yu Qianqiu walked to the center and pointed at the two people he brought. He said, "Let me introduce them. They are friends from Hidden Dragon Manor. Do you know them? Long Xiaojiu, Guang Nianzu." The two people cupped their hands and introduced themselves. Wan Ling, who was standing by the window, walked over and smiled. "I didn't expect Miss Long to be here." Guang Nianzu's expression changed when he saw Wan Ling. He looked at Long Xiaojiu worriedly. However, Long Xiaojiu's expression only changed slightly. Then she smiled and said, "Miss Wan, we meet again." Shui Mingqing and Mu Tianjiao smiled and nodded to greet the two newcomers. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong, on the other hand, looked at each other. Both of them had heard of the story of Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu. These two were enemies. How did they meet here? Hee. It's good that you know each other. Everyone sit down. Yu Qianqiu smiled and invited everyone to take a seat. After he sat down, he looked around and asked Mu Tianjiao curiously, "Where are the two people protecting you?" He was asking about the two golden-robed men who were protecting her. "I don't need anyone's protection here. I've invited them to stay at the Chamber of Commerce Alliance for the time being." Mu Tian smiled. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, "Miss Mu is no longer the same as before. She is protected by the people of the Immortal Palace, wherever she goes. I'm so envious." Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked a little embarrassed when he said that, so he couldn't go on. Mu Tianjiao was well aware of this. She pointed at the furnishings in the living room and changed the topic. "I wonder who decorated this living room. It's quite elegant. If it's convenient, introduce it to me so I can learn from it." "Elegant?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "I'm just afraid of trouble. To save money, I just found a few chairs and threw them here. They're not elegant at all." Hee. I knew it. Hui Yunlong laughed and slapped his leg. Du Feng immediately tilted his head and sneered. He was being modest, but you took it seriously. Why don't you think about why this barren mountain became famous in the hands of sect leader Yu? Hui Yunlong stared at him and said, "Are you saying that I have no taste?" All right. Yu Qianqiu quickly stood up and stopped the two from arguing. He smiled and said to everyone, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I have a new friend here, so I don't have much to entertain you. Why don't I treat you to a bath?" "A bath?" Hui Yunlong was stunned. He thought he had heard wrong. The others also looked at each other in confusion. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "That's right. I have authentic mountain spring water downstairs. It's perfect for bathing. It's also a specialty of my World Chamber of Commerce. I wonder if you're interested. Is this appropriate?" Du Feng looked at Mu Tianjiao and the other two women. His words made the three women feel awkward. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained, "Actually, it doesn't matter. We have women in the World Chamber of Commerce too. The bathing area downstairs is separated into men and women. They won't interfere with each other. In that case, I'd like to experience the specialty of the World Chamber of Commerce." Wan Ling stood up with a smile and tilted her head to look at Long Xiaojiu. "I wonder if Miss Long is interested?" Long Xiaojiu's expression stiffened. Most women in this world were conservative. She wasn't used to talking about bathing with outsiders. However, Wan Ling's light and joking words were no different from provocation in her ears. She immediately gritted her teeth and stood up with a sweet smile. Then I'll accompany Miss Wan to experience the specialty of the World Chamber of Commerce. Seeing that everyone had agreed, everyone stood up and went downstairs. However, they were all stunned when they saw Mu Tianjiao sitting there alone. When Mu Tianjiao saw this, she waved at everyone and forced a smile. You guys go ahead. I'll be fine here. Yu Qianqiu was still a little confused. However, the others understood that Mu Tianjiao was about to get married. A woman's reputation was very important at this time. If a group of men and women went to bathe and spread rumors, it wouldn't be good. Moreover, Mu Tianjiao was going to marry the Immortal Palace's external affairs commander, Wu Xiong. Du Feng secretly transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu. Only then did Yu Qianqiu react. He immediately led a group of people downstairs. The large living room was empty. Mu Tianjiao slowly leaned against the rattan chair and sat there alone. There was a rather big basement under the World Chamber of Commerce. In order not to destroy the water vein of the mountain spring, Yu Qianqiu had personally built it. The entire basement was paved with white jade and illuminated by fluorescent stones. It was divided into two spaces, one big and one small. The big one was for men, and the small one was for women. When they reached the bottom, a passageway appeared in front of them. At the end of the left was a stone sculpture of a strong, bare-chested man. There was a small stone door on the side. At the end of the right was a stone sculpture of a buxom woman. There was also a small stone door on the side. The symbolic stone sculpture was very obvious. It undoubtedly told the visitors that the men should go to the left and the women to the right. The two women looked calm, but they were actually a little nervous. The men and women separated here. Yu Qianqiu led the group into the place where the men were bathing. When Hui Yunlong saw the environment inside, he immediately chuckled. This seems a little interesting. This was a circular space with a jade stone pool in the middle. The water in the pool was clear. The most attractive thing was that around the pool, there were 10 graceful and beautiful girls kneeling, standing, or lying on their sides. They were all stone sculptures with different movements. The only thing they had in common was that each of the 10 beautiful girls was holding a bottle and pouring water into the pool. This was where the clear spring water in the pool came from. At the same time, there were hidden grooves at the edge of the pool. When the water in the pool reached a certain height, it would flow out through the hidden grooves, maintaining the vitality of the mountain spring. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and greeted the group. He then took the lead to demonstrate. He took off his pants and walked into the step-like pool. The center seemed to be a little deep. It reached Yu Qianqiu's chin. After he wet himself, he swayed to a half-kneeling beauty stone sculpture. There was a place for him to lie down and enjoy the bath at the same time. Seeing the comfortable expression on his face, Hui Yunlong couldn't help but take off his clothes, leaving only his underwear. He couldn't wait to dive into the pool. He found that the pool water was cold, but very comfortable. Then he found a beautiful stone sculpture that he liked and enjoyed it. Du Feng and Guang Juanru looked at each other. They also took off their clothes and ran into the pool. The 4 men chatted and soaked in the pool. It was very comfortable. The layout of the women's bathroom that Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu were in was similar to the men's bathroom, but the space was much smaller. Beside the pool, there were 4 strong men's stone sculptures holding bottles and pouring water. But at least they had a pair of underwear. What made the 2 women speechless was that they didn't know which wicked person made these stone sculptures. The 4 men's heads were carved with cloth strips that covered their eyes. They were quite considerate of the women. But even so, the 2 women felt a little uncomfortable and blushed slightly. Although they were stone sculptures, if they really took off their clothes and soaked in the pool, they would still feel like they were being watched by men. Miss Long, why is your face red? Are you shy? Wan Ling suddenly looked at Long Xiaojiu and smiled. Long Xiaojiu looked back and sneered. Why don't you look at your face in the mirror? Wan Ling was stunned. Then, she felt that her face was also a little hot. She was speechless. Long Xiaojiu was also stunned. She realized that this was the first time she made this woman speechless. She felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure in her heart. At the same time, she felt a little strange. This woman was famous for being a slut. Who knew how many men she had hooked up with? How could she be shy? The environment here is really special. It's really unique. As Wanling spoke, she began to undress herself. After a while, she was only left with a pair of underwear and a doo-doo. Her slender thighs were straight, her exposed skin was smooth and white, and her graceful figure was curvy. Even a woman would be tempted to look at her. Wanling deliberately walked to Long Xiaojiu and stood beside her. She tilted her head to look at Long Xiaojiu, who was slightly shorter than her. It was obvious that she wanted to show off her figure. Then she swayed her waist and walked into the pool. After soaking in the water, she splashed water with her palm and wiped her fragrant shoulders. She said to herself, "There was once someone who kept saying that my figure was the best in the world. Unfortunately, that person was killed by a jealous woman." When she said that, Long Xiaojie was so angry that she almost bit her lips. The past flashed before her eyes. In the end, she suppressed her anger and slowly undressed her clothes. She also wore underwear and doo-doo and went into the water. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. When she walked to Wanling, she reached behind her and gently pulled down the doo-doo. Her two breasts popped out. The smile on Wanling's face froze. Her mouth was slightly open as she subconsciously looked at her chest. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.